You can just a city.
Yeah, this is informal.
Well, thank you, Mayor and Commissioners, for providing this time in advance of the Board of Commissioners meetings for public input. I would like to suggest something that has potential to benefit all aspects of town function and living in Canal Shores. And that is to improve, facilitate, and foster two-way communication between town entities and town citizens. Please do not receive this as a complaint. It is not. Improving communication with others is something with which all human beings persistently struggle, and we never fully succeed. I'll bet everyone participating in this meeting has experienced times when they wish they could have better communicated with a teenager, a friend, or especially their spouse. We spend our lives practicing communication, the sharing and exchange of information. I mean, it's the stuff that relationships and our lives are made of. Communication is important. We communicate because we care about others, about issues, about ourselves, and about communities. Good communication requires effort, but this effort is worthwhile. My suggestion to improve or make better, facilitate, make easier, and foster, encourage and promote the development of two-way communication, the exchange of information, thoughts, and ideas among town entities and town citizens has potential to lower the thresholds of our governmental and social challenges. How might we achieve improving, facilitating, and fostering communication? Improve the town's website. This could be achieved by using more intuitive organization, ongoing maintenance of links and with new information, adding a search function for queries, including a diagram of the town's organizational structure so folks know who to contact, adding links to alternate forms of communication outlets from like the town's Facebook, or I don't know if you have a YouTube channel, and linking to helpful state, federal, and the websites of other resources as well, when appropriate. Next, announce meetings far in advance of meeting dates. We all have busy calendars, and planning in advance fosters participation. Excuse me. So many of my thoughts have involved precipitation, and I think that. Next, hold some meetings and work sessions on alternate weeknight evenings and on weekends. I mean, I learned moving to the South that Wednesday night tends to be church night. And so if most of the meetings are held on Wednesday nights, we're missing a whole group of people. I've been talking to some of the younger families in town to learn their perspectives on the sidewalk issue. And a point that was often repeated is that many meetings are scheduled during the daytime when working family members cannot attend. Although Pine Hill Shores has many active retirees, it appears that our community demographics are becoming more age diverse, which is a good thing. To facilitate town involvement by the younger cohorts, we might ask when they could participate in town meetings and be sure to accommodate diverse schedules. Similarly, including weekends into meeting scheduling should facilitate participation by second homeowners. Next, update and refine email listservs to improve communications coming from town hall. Not everyone uses Facebook, social media, or even email. However, if the channels of town communications are known, residents would know where to seek information. You could enable sign up for certain listservs too, if they're kind of specific for different purposes, and that way people are getting, the information that they're specifically looking for. An important point is to recognize that greater public participation can slow the process of decision making. However, more inclusive discussion and planning will result in superior outcomes and better buy-in from citizens. Next, seek new opportunities to facilitate two-way communication, such as this half hour before the meetings, and I'm sure there are other ideas. Consider holding workshops and with citizen involvement for resolving challenging issues. For example, where are sidewalks or pathways really needed? How can I reduce water runoff from my property? How can I make my home more resilient to storms? How can Pine Hill Shores become more resilient, etc.? These are just a few suggestions. Improving communications is not something that can be done, box checked, and forgotten. It's ongoing. Our town benefits from having a wealth of expertise among our citizens. As we implement the strategic plan, it would be foolish not to incorporate at least some of this expertise. Please foster the input of citizens who have much to offer our town. Yes, working to improve communication will likely require extra effort initially. However, we should recognize the high rate of return for these efforts. I hope that you agree that our town, our community is worth this effort. Thank you. My name is Christine Voss. I'm on Locust.
If only people would really be interested in what's going on. Very often, we used to meet during the day, and we moved it to the evenings, I don't know, 15 years ago to accommodate what you're talking about. It's made zero difference. You can look around this room. Last week, we didn't have anybody here. I don't know what we have to do. I've got a suggestion I'm going to bring up and challenge the commissioners tonight to say, look, we'd like this input. We'd welcome it. We need this input. But most people really don't care. The only time we see people here, if there's some really hot button issue like sidewalks or changing the speed limit, I'm going to challenge the commissioners to each meeting to invite a person. Robert and I talked about it, and we don't know if it'll work, but if each month we brought a different person to the meeting, we may have to bribe them with dinner or something, I don't know.
Yeah.
We're online. Our last meeting, we had nobody online and nobody sitting in here, one person. And I don't know what we can do. It's the old story. You can take a horse to water, but you can't make them drink. And I've been involved with this for off and on for 30 years, and it hasn't changed a lick. You're right. I wish we could do it. I'm open to do anything we can, but most people don't want to be bothered. At the last meeting on sidewalks, I talked to a few people after. I said, people that I've known for 20 years and said, never see you at a meeting. You're here today, but you don't come. Don't you care? And they said, well, we're all too busy. We can't be bothered. And that's what it really comes down to. We could use the help, and we could use the input. It gets really, really old sitting here looking out at all these empty chairs. And after the meeting, I'll ask Charlie how many people were online, and the answer is maybe one or two, if any.
I can appreciate it can be frustrating, but
Still, you get good ideas and thoughts.
I think that maybe there needs to be some other modes. And again, just a simple thing like announcing some of the meetings much further in advance. And maybe there needs to be some repeat communications. I'm not sure. But I know that I went to the website to try to find some things and I couldn't find them. Links were broken. It's just, I mean, there's some things that could still be improved. And I would hope that it's kind of a positive feedback loop. Once there's some additional outreach to communicate. And I mean, some of the issues that are going to be coming up, at least involving the strategic plan, I would be very surprised if people really didn't care, if they had a way to contribute. It's in part, I think, up to the town to find a way for them to contribute.
I hope I didn't sound negative. I wasn't intending to. I'm just telling you what the facts are. And we welcome any way you can help us to get people here.
We could use, a person to work on the website and keep things up to date and to do more of that. But, we're in the middle of the budget process right now. And I like your idea about workshops on topics. I think that would be great. And especially because we could then draw on individuals in town who have some background expertise like yourself on different topics. When I think about this, I just all of a sudden, in my mind, a price tag comes up. What will it cost us? And, they're all good ideas. But then when you talk about weekend meetings, it may help some people out but then we have to pay staff overtime.
Or give them comp time off during the week.
One of the two, yeah.
Yeah.
You know, but it's those kinds of issues. We're a small town, and you know, not everybody's available all the time. But
I can appreciate that. I'm just suggesting that
Right.
we try some new things, maybe find some other ways, because there is buzz among different groups, especially when it comes to certain topics. And I too am frustrated seeing a disconnect.
Yeah.
I don't want to just be frustrated. So.
Ted, I have a slightly different perspective, but not totally, partially. And it comes from this. I hesitate in a way to go back and come forward, but one of the reasons we changed, I think the point's well taken, on Wednesday is not a good day for the reasons you mentioned. No, but I think that is true. We moved from days to evenings to try to accommodate that in 08 or so. I think it's not, I think using the last 2 years is tough, because I think all our schedules have been messed up with the natural health issue. I think we have to find a mix between automation and non-automation to accommodate a wide range of folks, some of which do everything off their phone and some that do everything off a piece of paper. So, I mean, we somehow have to do, and that's not meant towards anybody in particular. But when I first was here, the meetings were in the morning at 10 o'clock, and people showed up in casual clothes. And at 12 o'clock was the end of the meeting, and most of the business was done at 10 o'clock, 10 to 12. And they went home and they came back in a coat and tie, like our model was walking in the door now. They came back in the afternoon with a coat and tie. But no one could say anything in the morning, and I don't think they had 3 minutes. I think they had 2 minutes or something in the afternoon. And so part of the accommodation to have it at night was to accommodate what you said, but I think things have been changing socially so fast that we haven't accommodated very well. And I think one of the things that's easily doable, for instance, is as soon as it's practical to change the Wednesday thing, because I've heard that. I realize that's a big problem, both personally and otherwise.
People are more religious here than I thought.
Well,
I know.
I don't think it's just that. I think the pattern of life.
Would it be like Tuesday or Thursday better nights, or?
It's well, I don't, not here to solve the problem, just to try to come up with alternatives, it seems to me. The other thing, I'm dangerously mentioning this, but anyway, having been involved somewhere else, all the meetings are at night because everyone worked. Everyone, 90% of people work. So all the meetings were at 7 o'clock. And, but they also had cable TV that cabled all the meetings, because cable TV was through the towns, not through the state. You know, so I quickly realized, talking to some folks, that really here is much more top down. So that's been dictated by forces elsewhere with the cable, and so that means communication. But I do think we need to maybe just like some of those open sites like PKS Community or something, we should be putting out notices on that. Because there are some people that
I
have,
don't use Facebook personally, but I hear.
but a lot of people do, and they even have their math scores or whatever that, what's that game? You figure out the numbers or something?
Oh,
Sudoku?
Wordle.
I haven't done it.
Word. No, I didn't say I had either, but I see other, that's on there a lot. So obviously people communicate that way, you know?
Having electronic forms, yeah, just trying to think of, okay, what.
Right.
Electronic forms of communication are generally low cost. and they're more readily available. I mean, things are constantly going to evolve over time, but that would suggest that a greater proportion of the population will be using electronic forms of communication.
I think one of the easy ones is
I
they.
didn't want this to be a complaint, but I'm just.
No, I understand. I understand
The
totally.
website is something that could really, I mean, there's not a search feature on there. That I found really frustrating when you're looking for something specific. You can't even try any keywords. It's just.
Well, Ted's point's well taken. He has asked and has put people on.
Can we talk about that just for a second? The website piece. Because I have the same frustration. My question is, and I guess it would be to all of us, what is it that we want to provide as a website? And then how do we transition from what we have to what we want it to be? And if I'll speak a little bit out of turn, but Charlie, correct me if I'm wrong, you kind of inherited what was the website when you arrived that Sarah had sort of either started or someone had started putting in place. The transition to make it what would be, and I'll just use a generic example. I go on some town websites and they are just absolutely phenomenal. You can get to anything you want by asking simple questions or doing a search. When I go on through the documents library on our website, there are documents that stop in 2017. But I don't know where to go to get the 2018, 2019, 2021, now 2020. I don't know how to do that. So that's just an example, I think, of what Christine's talking about. You get so frustrated trying to use our website, and I'm not pointing at you. You just, I mean, you've inherited it, so maybe I am pointing at you, but I don't know what we need to do in order to make what we have something much better than it is. As the mayor says, are we talking, money? Do we have expertise, sir?
A consultant, maybe.
Well, do we have expertise?
There are models from other websites.
Of course.
Like you said, just go to some other towns, order features you like, you don't. Realize that this could be an additional perhaps expense or man hours, but I see it as an investment, something that will then eventually save. It might save 15% of your phone calls. Charlie, where do I find this?
Yeah, our website is good for the calendar. It comes up right away. And, but yeah, to search for a document is pretty crazy.
And we may have volunteer expertise in town. I don't know.
Charlie, why don't you?
I'll just say, so, yeah, I came in and got the website, and from what I understand, the provider that gives us the website, they pretty much just give us a platform, and then we're here to fill in everything else that goes into it. I don't claim to be a website designer. I have a lot of friends who make a lot of money on website design, and there's certainly services that have that. But I take what I have and I put all the information that's needed to be on there. So I'm pretty much adding to what we have already. I don't have the tools to restructure everything to make it seem more fun. And when I came in, we had a document library, which was pretty much broken. And so I had to work with Stefan on trying to transfer that all over to a new system. And in that process, stuff got moved and there's things that aren't where they're supposed to be. I'm still trying to go in and try to.
Well, I guess one of my thoughts is, and I think your discussion is very helpful, but I would also suggest that you laid out a number of things, and it's not that we can't parallel process, we can. But I think we ought to take one or two of those things and actually do something, try to do something about it.
Maybe you all have been thinking about this for a while too. I was just thinking.
Well,
it can only help.
yeah, I give you my experience, having sat where you are for many years on and off I think the town has done a fairly credible job of trying to accommodate all of those groups that have different schedules and demands. In PKA, we've done the exact same thing. We've gone from the morning, nobody shows up, to the evening, nobody shows up. We've shifted off of Wednesday to Thursday, nobody. That's not true. There are a number of folks that actually do show up, but it's in the, on my, I can count them on 3 fingers. So when I sent a note out about, I think it was the sidewalk meeting that was going to start at 5 o'clock. One of the first responses I got back was, 5 o'clock, come on, what are you smoking? People work around here, why? Well, the problem is it lasted until 7:30. Doesn't mean that somebody can't walk in, and those ground rules may not necessarily be set out there, but I think that may be something that we try to work on. I don't know about I hadn't thought about do one in the morning, do one in the evening. That may be too hard for people to follow. That may be too hard for the commissioners to follow. Are we meeting in the morning or are we meeting in the evening today? But I think we ought to at least take some of what you've done and try to do something with it. I think the website would be a huge improvement.
Like I said, reach out, put call out to volunteers in certain skills too. It doesn't all have to be a great expense, or there are people in town that I think would be willing to help out.
Emails don't cost you anything, and the return that you could get, as you suggest, could be high if you've got somebody out there that knows how to do this sort of thing.
Even if you just got, if we're, 3 people to help with this, 3 people to help with that, for 3 months or something like that, maybe. It doesn't, I'm trying to be budget conscious.
Yep.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, I agree with it. I think the website would be my priority, to first improve. Get the most, bang for the buck, so to speak, doing something.
Thank
with that.
you.
Well, I'm not averse to changing the day we meet. Weekend meetings,
No, I
I'm
didn't
willing
know
to,
that.
I'm willing to try, but your summer part-timers aren't going to come in a weekend. 99% aren't going to come. They're going to be in the beach.
Unless it affects them direct.
Well, yeah, perhaps, yeah.
Yeah, that, to me, the weekends may be better for a workshop.
Yeah, I'd
Maybe
say
if
it's
you're putting out a doodle poll or something and saying, hey, respond and see, and then at least, okay, what do the majority of respondents say? Then a good time.
Charlie.
I'd just like to point out for weekend meetings, if we think that'll attract second homeowners more, we got 8 people online right now, and I know at least a couple of them are second homeowners. So I don't know if that would directly be the issue.
But, they're participating because they can do it online now.
Maybe that's sufficient.
They don't have to be here. I mean,
But they're not online either.
But Charlie, I would say the folks that the friends that you have that are making a whole lot of money doing that sort of stuff, we don't want to talk to them.
I think our website's come a long way. It really has.
I agree.
Mhm.
I think it's also difficult seeing from the building side. I don't know people's perspective from just looking at it. So if anyone has feedback specifically on things they need change, I'd be happy to hear any of it.
Oh, yeah. Okay, 2 minutes, 2 minutes before we go into the next
The
meeting.
email addresses for all the commissioners were not live. They were somewhat broken. Just one quick thing.
I would suggest that if you're a standard, whatever standard is, citizen out there, and we as the elected officials or the town staff say, you need to stay up, or we would like for you to stay up on what we're doing. The one method they have to do that is to go read the minutes. And at the moment, being able to get to the minutes in a very efficient and logical way isn't possible. So for us to say just go read the minutes and you'll see what we're up to. I think it's a little disingenuous because we haven't really given them an easy way to go do that. So that may be one of the things that we start looking at.
Okay. Unless anybody has anything else they'd like to add, we're down to less than a minute here.
Change the meeting, when they changed it from whatever night it was to Wednesday night, Julie and I were going to convert to the Baptist church and miss all the meetings. So, but if you change it for Thursday night, because there always seems to be a lot of work up the week of the meetings. I don't want to.
You don't want to do it Monday
I don't
night?
want it to be Monday, Tuesday.
Yeah, Monday conflicts with the Board of Commissioners meeting at the county board too.
That's one thing.
Thursday would be a good night. Give that a shot.
Not for me.
No? Okay.
Okay, at this point, I'd like to call the first regular monthly meeting of the Pine Hill Shores Board of Commissioners to order. Please stand and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, thank you very much. Before we approve the agenda, let me get a count from Charlie about how many people we have online at this point.
We have 9 attendees.
Okay. Thank you. The next item on the agenda is the approval of the agenda. Does anybody have any additions or deletions or changes they would like to make to the agenda?
I haven't seen the amended agenda. Are the two appointments for the Committee Appearance Commission on there?
I'll cover them verbally. One is Walter Steele, who is applied to be a member of both the Community Appearance Commission and the History Committee. And the second addition was Penny Holland, who right now I think is she like an alternate or a part-time member of the CAC and she wants to become a full-time? Is that it?
Yeah.
Okay.
There's another one too, Eddie Stallings
Yeah.
has applied for the
three.
CAC.
CAC, that's right. Yeah.
Yeah.
He's on there too. And then
Still.
David Triplett. I just tried to cover the ones that were changes, I thought.
Okay, are they on the amended agenda?
They are.
Okay, good. I don't have it in front of me. Okay.
I would just generally, and not for today, but think that these appointments would be on the regular agenda rather than on the,
The consent.
Yeah.
rather than on the other agenda. It's not any secret, so why not just,
Right.
Have them on the regular
That's fine with me. I have always tried to go through the volunteer appointment things name by name. So
no, I know you'd have.
we're
We don't
on
want
the
to have,
record as
we
to
don't wanna
what
have
we're
a-
doing,
do we really,
rather than just, approving them without naming them. But we could put that on the,
do we really want to have a discussion for each person or do you just want their
No,
name
no,
on
just
the
that it's
agenda?
public. It's not hidden under
So maybe
consent
in,
agenda. It could just go, say, I know
Yeah.
the mayor does that, but it shouldn't have to do that.
well, the consent agenda, would it be nice to just have the names under the consent agenda instead of them just a decision item?
right there.
So that the people would
Yeah,
see
but I
their
don't know why
name?
have it on the consent agenda then, if we're doing that.
I guess
That is-
my concern is I don't think we need to discuss
Oh, no, it's not just.
three,
We wouldn't
appointments
discuss it.
each
It's
one.
common not to discuss that.
Why don't-
It made me face, but
Why don't we just have like volunteer appointments and then list the names and what they're applying for,
that's fine.
right on the agenda itself.
So then
So
people could
it's
see. Yeah.
documented, right?
It's just no reason to have any secret.
Okay, any other suggested changes or comments?
No.
I'd like to entertain a motion to approve the agenda.
Second.
Okay, all those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Okay, thank you. Based on the agenda we just approved, are there any disclosures or conflicts of interest?
Yeah, I have a conflict with the issue related to the History Committee, so I'll recuse myself from any discussion there.
Okay, thank you, Robert. Next item are announcements. April 15th, this Friday, Town Hall is closed for a holiday. April 16th at 10 o'clock at Garner Park. The Easter egg hunt is on. And this is the egg hunt where we have different sections of the park roped off for different age groups. So the 12-year-olds don't trample the 3-year-olds and that kind of thing. And it's our first, I think, in-person egg hunt since the pandemic. So it'll be nice to see everybody come back out again. The Easter Bunny, I'm told, is going to arrive on a fire truck. And then April 27th at 6 p.m. is our second regular Board of Commissioners meeting. And now we've never said whether we're going to be available at 5:30 or not, but I think the second meeting we had last month in March, a number of us came at 5:30 anyway, but I don't think anybody showed up. But I'll leave that up to the commissioners if they want to come at 5:30 or not for that one, but I'll plan on being here for sure.
I just try to make it consistent so someone's here,
Yeah, so have someone here.
because we don't want to make it more complicated for them to show up.
Okay. All right, thank you. Does anybody else have anything else they'd like to bring up under announcements? Okay. Public comment period. Charlie, do we have any public comments?
Yes, sir. I have one letter to read, and then there's someone online who's going
Okay.
to read this letter first. This is from Yolanda Lozano, 126 Mimosa Boulevard. Greetings. I couldn't be at the BOC meeting this evening, but I wanted to send this note. I just wanted to acknowledge the change in tone of the comments made by Mr. Kramer and Mayor Brodman in the April Shoreline articles. The articles as written were neutral and honest, and I hope this will continue. I think it's important for public officials to be objective and state the facts. Thank you for your service to the town and community. Respectfully submitted, Yolanda Lozano.
She can write, and she can write more frequently if she likes.
And then I have Matthew Learberg online to make a comment.
Yes, this is Matt Learberg. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Yes, we can.
Wonderful. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak with you briefly. My name's Matt Learberg. I am a part-time resident at the Bogue Shore Club, and I'm a huge fan of our town. I'm speaking in support of an agenda item that is the second item in new business, which is the potential installation of an electric vehicle charging station on town property. Three brief things. First, the chargers are badly needed. There are, of course, an increasing number of electric vehicles in the general population as well as on the island. There are no public charging stations within 20 minutes of Pine Knoll Shores. There are only a couple on the island, and they are way down by the Emerald Isle Bridge. Having some access to public charging stations would be wonderful for existing residents, and they would use them regularly, I think. It would attract visitors, and of course, it would make a tiny contribution to keeping our islands clean, as those vehicles are zero emissions. So I would encourage the board to consider that agenda item, and if there are ways that I can be of service to the board or to the clerk as they consider this possibility, I'd love to make myself available to help. Thank you so much.
Thank
Okay,
you.
well, thank you, Matt. Does anybody have any questions or comments for Matt
Not now.
on the EV charging station?
I just appreciate him taking the time to comment.
Mhm. Matt, do you have an electric vehicle?
Yes, I do, and several other residents at the Bogue Shore Club do as well. Right now, we have no real options when we come down, so sometimes I bring my gas vehicle instead.
Do you have an EV charging station at your Bogue Shore Club?
No, I haven't asked the board to install, but my understanding is that most of the homeowners boards and condo boards are they are disinclined to install chargers.
If you wanted to install your own there, do you have a space where you could do that?
I have tried that route and it has not been approved by the board there. But I think my sense is that with an increasing number of folks with electric vehicles, even if I were miraculously to succeed in convincing that board, it would be a temporary solution because the need will only increase from here, I think.
Yeah, I think so. Clerk.
How expensive are they to, does anyone know?
Depends
Without
on,
grants?
depends on how fast.
We're going to go through this on the grant. aren't we?
Oh, okay.
We'll be discussing this later, and I appreciate you bringing it up because we are in the middle of a transition, if you will, and 10 years from now, I think there will probably be plenty of EV charging stations around the island, but how you get from A to B is the question I think we're wrestling with right now. So
John,
thank
I
you
have
very
a
much.
question for the caller. Do you have any idea why boards are opposed to putting them into their condominium complexes?
Yes, I think that the boards are focused on a sense of fairness and treating all of the residents equally. And because only a subset of the owners have electric vehicles, they're wrestling with how to make that fair. I think that, one of the advantages that government can provide is that by installing a public charger, whether, there are ways for individuals who park there to pay for their own electricity, but it's a public good that the public can use. And the fairness, not every resident uses every public service from the government. So the government's in a better position to offer such a service as compared to, an organization of only 30 some people.
Thank you.
I think also some of the reluctance may be that they don't want the public coming into their condominium association and perhaps overwhelming, the use of it to the exclusion of their own residents. They just don't want to see that.
It's true of the town too. It's true of the town too.
Okay, all right. Anybody else on that? Okay, moving right along. Next item is the consent agenda. First item on the consent agenda is the March 9th, 2022 Board of Commissioners meeting. Does anybody have any comments or corrections they'd like to make to those minutes?
I think I do on,
Okay,
let's see, on the 9th, page 14, I think. I thought it was on page 14. I'm sorry, page 3. The one,
What page?
I'm sorry, page 3. I apologize. The concern I have for these particular notes in the beginning here, when it talks about the 5:30 discussion, Bill Osmowski was concerned about the public being unable to write articles for the shoreline. I think we have to be careful about over editing what people are saying. And my concern is if this is a legal record of what occurred during the meeting, that comment does not capture what Mr. Osmowski was talking about. What he said was there was no option to write alternative views in the shoreline. This would lead you to believe that the public wasn't able to write an article. So I think that if you go down to the last item, Mike Stroop believes the kayak launch at Town Hall not be utilized. He also said that he believed that the HOAs should look at opening their access to kayak, their kayak launchers. My point being, I recognize we don't necessarily want this to be or need to be a verbatim discussion, but if we over edit what people are saying, it's not going to capture what was intended by their comments. So I would make an observation that this is over edited. So whether we want to change it or not, sorry?
No, I was just raised that.
Okay, whether we want to edit it or not, I defer to the commissioners, but I don't really think this captures what the discussion was.
Julie?
My general question of what Robert brought this up is, I need to understand whether or not we should even be putting anything from the 5:30 part into, because the regular meeting doesn't start until 6. And so.
Yeah.
And we're not, although I'm not sure we had people electronically right here and available at 5:30. So my preference would probably not have any 5:30 discussion in there, because that's just an open forum. It's an informal discussion. I don't think we should, that's not regular monthly meeting minutes. My personal opinion, I would say leave it out, but that's up to the board.
I'd agree with that.
I don't have an issue with that.
I agree with it also, and I think when we talked about having these 5:30, I actually brought up that issue. If we're going to get a public record, we need to convene at 5:30 as opposed to convening at 6 o'clock. I mean, it's just discussion.
That brings up another issue, and that is during the public comment period during the Board of Commissioners meeting. Do we edit them? Do we put them in verbatim? Which is a lot of work, or do we just reference that these people spoke without going into details what they spoke about, knowing that there's an electronic record?
For public comments, I try to write them out verbatim.
Verbatim?
Question for Neil. If we were to leave that out in the minutes, should we just say prior to the meeting, there was a public forum with a majority of the commissioners present and no official business was acted on?
You don't even need that.
It's not an official, is it indeed an official part of the meeting?
Majority of the members of the board get together to hear, you don't have to discuss, but if you're going to hear comment from the public, that is an official meeting. And so you do need to have minutes of that official meeting, but they can simply be that the board heard comments from the public on various subjects. You could also just list who the speakers were. But I would agree with Julie that trying to capture what each speaker says is probably not right. It's not necessary. And it takes a whole lot of time if you're going to try to be real accurate. But I would also say that it applies to public comment too.
So we have a 3-minute limit on the public comment, and on the open forum, it's not a 3-minute limit. So
And the mayor can't really, I don't want to sort of argue the other side of that, but I've been here where your public comment goes on for 30 minutes. And if you put 30 minutes worth of public comment, that takes up a lot of time, takes up a lot of your clerk's time, but that's up to the board. That's totally up to the board. I will say this, you generally need to have a minimum, what Robert's Rules of Order says. And basically that would be the agenda itself. And if there are motions, a detailed statement of what the motion is and whether it got seconded and what the vote, that's sort of the minimum. And as long as you do the minimum, you're going to be okay. And then in addition to that, it's just what the board wants. And as Admiral Cox says, some of this is a historic record of the town. And so you don't want anything in there to be inaccurate. And when you start editing comments, you run that risk. So again, I agree with Julie that with respect to the 5:30 informal public forum, even though it is an official meeting, I think it's better not to try to summarize what the folks are saying. And then whatever you want to do with normal public comment within the agenda, just what the board is most comfortable with.
Are electronic records kept in perpetuity?
That's the question.
What's the situation?
How
with
long do
those?
we keep them?
Okay, so if I came to you and asked you something 6 months ago, you would have electronic summary then?
Yes.
You mean
or
the-
30 years ago.
Oh, no, okay. Well, probably not 30 years ago.
Are you talking about the recording?
Not the recordings.
Well, that's why I was trying to get.
Yeah, The actual recording, electronic recording.
No, those are not in perpetuity.
Right.
The reason I asked that question is that I have personally gone back into the records here as the town manager knows, going back to 1983, going back to Pine Knoll, where the fire station is now, where the bank was now, and finding out what the agreement was with the land that backs up where the pond is and so forth. I would hate to see that information be just put away somewhere where you can never retrieve it, because the implications were very informative and helpful. Especially, I don't even know where to find it in those files now, but especially the ones to do with the engineer from Wilmington that had to do with the backflow of the water from, that was originally to go into the canal and flow upstream, which is hard to do. And also the lot that the town owns and what can be done with it, what cannot be done with it, going into the aquarium on the left-hand side. Because it was what the agreement was when they rezoned it and so forth. So also I'm putting up, I guess, not a smoke screen, but a warning signal, is let's not just go to the minimum, because that kind of gives you a free rein to do almost anything. And I think that in a way goes against what our speaker talked about very much in the beginning.
Well, I guess my last comment on it is, am I incorrect, Neil, in saying if it's not in the minutes, then it didn't happen? I mean, that's kind of a general statement. And if it's in the minutes that, Mr. Smith stood up and spoke, well, that doesn't help anybody. Nobody knows what Mr. Smith said. But if it's not in the minutes and the minutes are used in some litigation in the future, yet what was stated or decided was not in the minutes accurately.
What was decided needs to be in the minutes. What was stated does not need to be in the minutes. I mean, it can be if you want it, but it's not action of the board. And start with what Robert's rules requires, and probably Archives has some publication on sort of the minimum in addition to Robert's rules. But once you go beyond the minimum, you're just balancing the expense of getting more and more and more detail. But what somebody says is not action of the board. What the board approves is board action.
Okay, let me just summarize where I think we are on this. I think we decided that for the informal session from 5:30 to 6, we won't do a verbatim repeat of what people say, but we may list the speakers, just list their names of who spoke at the meeting, something of that order. When it comes to public comments during the meeting, Charlie will do a verbatim, type out a verbatim record that will go into the permanent record for that meeting. Are we agreed on that?
Yeah, and also, but when we approve the minutes, we're approving, so if you have a problem, what was said as backup information to a motion, if you approve the minutes, you're approving that at the same time, correct?
Right.
So maybe we shouldn't skim too much on the background as to why we took a vote and so forth. That's useful.
I'll just point out that the verbatim public comments has really been easy in COVID. People are submitting them written.
Yeah.
Started that, so we need to encourage
People.
That's the best way.
People go up there, it kind of started with the rezoning thing. People were taking comments over, so we need to we need to encourage people to come over to write the public comment and give us a copy.
And then give a copy.
And it'll go word for word, make things a lot easier for them to.
Okay.
I've got Christine's notes from her speaking, and I have Matthew's. So
Okay.
those will go right now for me, so that'll be helpful.
Okay.
Democracy's messy, but it's the best thing on earth.
And Mayor, if the board wants to put the resources
Into it, there's nothing to keep you from doing, your minutes can be a transcription of everything everybody said. From 6 o'clock until adjourn.
Yeah.
It's just, do you want a stenographer? And that essentially is what happens. You want a stenographer to take everything down.
We looked into.
then our meetings would be twice as long.
Yes.
The closed caption can be a little, it
Okay.
can be a little geeky.
Moving on from March 9th, we've had an interesting discussion on that. I'm not sure we've actually made any changes to the March 9 minutes.
Well, but do we want to make a change in that first paragraph,
Delete.
modify it, delete it, or just modify it to say, so-and-so, these people appeared and just talked to the commissioners?
Yeah, I mean, we can do that.
We can do that, yeah.
Basically, like we're saying we're going to go forward with.
That's a good idea, Bill.
Okay. All right, moving on to the March 14th meeting
Well, wait a
minutes.
minute. If we're going to do that, do we need a motion now? We're going to defer these until Charlie redoes it.
Well,
Or we could take one vote at the end on the entire consent agenda as we agreed.
Can I just ask you a question though?
Sure.
So are we saying you can come in and say but we're not gonna, doesn't make any difference? Why bother?
Well, we're
5:30.
hearing.
We're listening.
I think.
Well, if you want it in the actual minutes, you could submit a letter to Charlie.
Or say it in the public comment period.
Yeah.
I think the objective of the 5:30 to 6 originally was simply to have, recognizing Neil's caution that it is a meeting. The intent was to simply have an informal, free flow of discussion between anybody who wanted to come in and speak on an issue and not have the restrictions associated with the formal meeting. So, some of that's gone a little bit farther than just the informal discussion, but that was the intent. So I don't know if that makes a difference in how we capture it.
Just communicate it.
Mhm.
And I think it was also, so this was pretty new, this is only the second time, right? I think it was also that we didn't know exactly who of the board was going to be able to show up necessarily at 5:30 every meeting. Remember at one point we were talking about maybe they would rotate and one person would be, wouldn't necessarily, we didn't expect for the whole board to necessarily be here every time, or that there be more than two or whoever. So that was, we're just trying to work out the kinks of it, I think.
I'm going to suggest we defer approving the March 9 minutes until it's,
Okay.
rewritten.
Good. All right, March 14th meeting minutes. Does anybody have any changes they'd like to make to those?
I have a question. Up at the top, it says the meeting started at 2 o'clock.
Oh, yeah.
And down below, it says the meeting is 7:36. I did read across here.
It felt like it.
5 o'clock.
5 o'clock.
Good catch.
I think there's one more edit on page 10, the same page on the, I guess it's the large paragraph, second sentence down says, were all discussed in great deal.
Yeah.
I think that's detailed
Detail.
by several town residents.
Right.
Okay. Any other changes? Okay, moving on, the March 23rd meeting minutes. Anybody have any comments or changes or corrections to those?
I do.
The
Okay.
March,
On page 14. It's stated Julie Anderson refuted Larry's comment. I just think we should use a different term than refuted, perhaps responded. It kind of says Larry, you're all wet, and he wasn't. And I don't think that's what was intended, but
Okay.
we should suggest we
Like the last.
respond to
Disagree with Larry's comment, something like that.
Well, yeah, however you want to hear, but I think review is not the right.
My question is, Charlie, do you have to say due to the COVID-19 pandemic, the boardroom was closed to the public? I thought we had.
That was a copy over from previous minutes. I'll remove that.
Okay, thank you.
And any other changes or suggestions on the March 23rd meeting minutes? Okay. Volunteer appointments. Walter Steele has submitted a request to be appointed to the Community Appearance Committee, and it's my understanding that the Commissioner Liaison, Bill Connect, and Steve Felch have agreed to appoint him. Eddie Stallings has also submitted a request, volunteer request to become appointed to the Community Appearance Commission, and Commissioner Connect and Steve Felch have agreed to take him on. And Penny Holland, who right now I believe is she an alternate or is she a second homeowner member?
The second homeowner.
Second homeowner member of the Community Appearance Committee has submitted a volunteer application to become a full-time member of the Community Appearance Committee, and Steve Felch and Commissioner Connect have approved her. David Triplett, who is the second homeowner who lives on Pinewood Circle, has submitted an application to be a second homeowner representative on the planning board. And it's my understanding that Paul Payne and PARC have met with him and approved him. He has a lot of previous experience in local government. And then Walter Steele has submitted a volunteer application to become appointed to the History Committee. And who's the liaison here with the History Committee?
Clark.
Clark?
No, I want, yeah.
No, wait,
I am.
you
Is he
I am.
doing two?
I am,
He
yeah.
wants two committees, Walter Steele?
No, this is,
Yeah.
yeah, Walter Steele. He
Yeah.
wants,
Nothing
he's on two
prohibits
committees.
Okay.
Aren't you the liaison now?
No, we switched. Clark's the
No,
liaison.
it's in Parks and Rec.
I'm Park and
She's-
Rec.
Okay.
Okay,
We did a
anybody
trade.
have any comments on any of those
Then let's switch it.
appointments?
I just have one question, and pardon, I'm fine with the assignments, but pardon my ignorance on this. I may not have followed it. Were all of these, with the exception of Penny's, were all of these advertised? These positions that were available, were they all, did we send out something advertising?
I don't believe so.
No.
I think it was just closed them out and
Okay, I think we should.
I was gonna say,
I'm happy with this, but I think we should advertise them every single
I
time.
think we should too. I didn't realize they hadn't been advertised.
Yeah, like we have one coming up with the Strategic Planning Committee, which we will be advertising, I believe.
I think all openings should be advertised when there's an opening.
Okay. Then the final thing on the consent agenda is the tax discoveries and releases. And unless Julie, you want to say something about that? It's okay. And at this point, unless there's any further discussion, I'd like to entertain a motion to approve everything on the consent agenda except the March 9, 2022 meeting minutes.
As amended.
As amended.
As amended,
right.
Yes.
As amended. Okay, any further discussion? All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Okay, thank you. Unfinished business. Continued discussion on the fiscal year 2022-23 general fund budget. Town Manager Kramer, please.
Yeah, good evening, everyone. So at the meeting on March 23rd, we identified an initial delta of 840,000. And we talked about some options to address this. So the purpose of this discussion, and again, don't need to make a final decision on the budget tonight or immediately, but we're moving toward May now. We have to have it done in June. is to talk about some further options. And we talked about a few of these, or one of these, but I'd like to remind the board that there were two options that I presented. I won't run down the list. You'll see it right there on page 18. I'm still recommending option one with all of the revenue and expenditure adjustments that you see listed there. But there are three additional considerations for the board. One is we have $200,000 of ARP funds remaining. A consideration might be to use 100,000 of that for to address this. Additionally, we normally appropriate some amount of fund balance each year. Some amounts, it differs, and we've appropriated more than 100,000 in the past and less. But appropriation of 100,000 of fund balance could be considered. And then the one that we talked about a little bit at the meeting is a slight reduction in the sand tax, one penny off of both municipal service districts, 1 cent off of both ocean and non-ocean. Those three steps there, the total property tax increase would be 4.3 cents. But if we include that sand tax reduction, the total tax impact on our citizens would be 3.3 cents. I want to point out on the sand tax that we bring in about 325 a year in sales tax in revenue that goes into the beach fund. If we were to eliminate this penny, that would reduce that about 100,000 for 1 penny, obviously. So we'd still be putting about $225,000 a year into our beach capital reserve for future beach renourishment projects. So I want to make clear that we're not talking about eliminating the sand tax, but an option because of the deficit we face right now for this year. So that's what I'd like the board to consider, and I'm looking forward to some thoughts and guidance so we can move forward on this. And we'll talk about this again in 2 weeks as well.
I just have a clarification question. The 3.3% or 4.3 cent increase, is that using option one? You're saying you're thinking option one, not option two, when you figured that.
So option one by itself is a 6.3 cents tax raise. What I'm saying is if you look at those three additional considerations, each one would reduce the tax burden on the citizens.
I'm just saying you're starting with option one, deducting, not option two. That was it.
Correct.
That was, I just need to understand that. Thank you.
Yeah.
I like option one, and I'm okay with the 100,000 ARP and the fund balance. However, I'm not in favor of reducing the sand tax by 1 penny. We've been fortunate over the years that major renourishments have come after a named storm.
Right.
We could have severe damage without a named storm, and we got to pay for it ourselves. We also don't know in the future what funds are going to be available. Federal or state funds. Yes, there's money there now, but we can't count on it. We may have to renourish by ourselves. So I don't think we should reduce the sand tax. I think we still should build up that reserve as much as possible. The beach is what draws people here.
What is the salary increase equal to total amount?
10%.
In the current fiscal year or next?
No, the one that we're in right now of this imbalance.
Well, this imbalance is for next year.
No, well, I mean for next year.
300 and, well,
Yeah, the total impact was over 300,000.
47.
I can't remember exactly, but it was.
That was
Okay, I just wanted to get,
Total year impact was 346 or
347. something like that.
I just didn't want to play fiddle fuddle with that, so. I agree with Bill's comment. I'm not sure here in the middle of April that I feel I'm really in a position to make a judgment even on those other two, to be very honest. Is there a need to have a final decision now?
No, I repeat, not looking for a decision. I wanted feedback on these or other direct.
I'm just considering what other moving pieces are involved.
Mhm.
I'm a little bit concerned that ARP is which? FEMA? What's ARP?
ARP is federal money that was given to us. Correction, it was provided to all municipal governments, and we can use it for essentially any governmental function that.
I think that's really dangerous because it comes across as freebie money, and I think we ought to be very careful about how we use that. Just philosophically, I have a real problem with how we use that. I think it should be for unusual extra things that we might not normally have to fund every year. I don't think we should get used to it. And then all of a sudden, 2 years from now is a giant leap because we spend it on something that recurs every year, trailing obligations, heard that term before.
Is there a expiration date on spending ARP funds?
It's well beyond this fiscal year.
Yeah.
2024?
Yeah, I think so.
2026 is
Yeah, obligated by 24. Okay.
An example to me, now it's probably already going to come out of that, but having a building beyond what's going on now with public services, to me is something that normally we might not have done, but with that type of money, it makes it worthwhile over a 30-year, 40-year period. So the type of thing that I would spend it on would be like that.
Clark, the ARP funds, would you consider using it for like our overlap of staff as we're doing our transition plan? Maybe?
It wouldn't be a preferred thing, no, because I think that's something we should be paying out of our regular budget as a plan to it's not winning the lottery money. This is winning the lottery money to me. Feds just came along and threw it at you. So you don't do something you don't need.
Mm-hmm.
You do something that you might normally buy a used tire, and now you can buy a new tire. Metaphorically, as an individual, not as a police department. I don't want them on used tires.
I am strongly opposed to reducing the beach tax. I was a commissioner when we had to renourish the beach ourselves. And there's no guarantee in the future that we're going to have federal funds available. This is a gift, this last one. If we reduce it, I can remember what a sales job we had to do to convince people, especially the people north of Highway 58, to participate at all in the beach tax. If we reduce it, we're never going to get it back. The last beach renourishment was what, about $15 million to do it? We've got 4 million now, approximately, right? That's a big delta of $11 million. The beach is why everybody in town is here primarily. It's the economic engine that drives this town. And if we reduce that and save $60,000 out of a $5 million budget, we're making a tragic, tragic mistake.
And
We'll never get it back.
I'll tell you just some thoughts, and I'm sure I'll have a lot of rotten eggs thrown at me. What's the implication of the reduction in the beach tax? And before you answer that, have we done this previously? Have we adjusted the beach tax historically, or have we not?
We have, but let me answer that in context. So the first beach tax was the beach tax to pay off the bond that Ted said had to be passed by vote. That changed several times. Sometimes there were neutral changes due to revaluations. And at least once it was an outright reduction in that tax. When we passed this tax, when the bond expired in 2010 timeframe.
In fiscal year 11, 12 is when we renewed.
Yeah, so the bond was paid off, and we initiated the new sand tax, which which is just savings. We've not reduced that. We've changed it
You raised it.
we've changed it due to tax valuation to keep revenue neutral, but we haven't reduced the sand tax yet. And I'm gonna have to check, but I'm next to certain, the original sand tax for the bond had one reduction that wasn't related, but I'll have to check.
Yeah.
It did.
I guess,
So we had one history of a reduction in sand tax.
okay. I guess the thing that I'm having a little bit of a problem with is when we say we're gonna reduce this or we're gonna change it, I don't know what the implication then. I don't have the next number that says what the fund balance will be if we take 100,000 out. I'd like to have something that says, okay, if I take the fund balance down 100,000, then here's where the fund balance is as a result of that reduction. And am I not,
No,
does that make sense?
it would be the same. I think she can answer that.
Sure,
off
yeah.
the top of her head.
I'd rather have it on a piece of paper so that I can, I'm sure you could probably answer it, but.
Well, so,
Should be, yeah.
hang on, I'm trying to find my dashboard in here real quick. Okay, so right now in the beach funds, between the two of them, we have $4.4 million. So instead of adding 300 and, so, hang on a second. When you reduce your sand tax, the sales and use tax that we get that's associated with that was also going to go down. Okay, so your tax revenue will go down by about $100,000. So instead of adding 326 to it every year, we'll only be adding 226 to
Right.
4.4 every year.
Right.
And then your sales and use tax will go down a little bit too. And that budget is like 137,000 a year that we get from that. I can't tell you how much I would estimate that would go down.
But
Fortunate.
the difference though, in terms of, as you said, we're gonna have a major storm and suddenly we're not gonna have FEMA money and we're gonna have to pay for it ourselves. If we leave things the way they are and we're at 4.7 plus,
Mhm.
and instead we're at 4.6 plus. My view is in our current economic environment, that's a risk worth taking. Now, I just don't see the reduction of 100,000 compared to 4 point some odd million as being a huge risk that we're taking. Now, maybe I don't understand it, but I understand the amount of money we have. So my view would be that would be something we should consider.
The reason I think I've got a majority of the board's view on this, so the reason I think now in 2022 is different, Ted, respectfully, and everyone opposed to it in 2001 is, okay, 2001 was the first renourishment. Okay, there was no, and it was a deliberate renourishment by the county, by the towns in the county, as opposed to, it was a result of storms, but it wasn't following an Irene, or following a Florence or whatever. So us, Emerald, Indian Beach, all that money. Okay, fast forward to 2022. The state has a very viable storm damage reduction fund right now that should have that number off the top of my head, but
52 million.
Representative McElrath has done a real good job. Not saying we should count on that, but I'm saying we should consider that if we simply reduce how many hundreds of thousands we put into our $4.2 million now, not there's 50 million in the state. And then lastly, I would add, if we do have to do our own renourishment, there's a storm this year, hurricane hits, and we have to do a $10 million renourishment, a couple $100,000 in our reserves, and I make a whole big difference in the new bond. I mean, we would have to get another bond if we had to do a major renourishment on ourselves, pay for it ourselves. And that would take 2 years, by the way, worth of referendums and all that jazz. So that's the thing in context. I don't want to imply that if we reduce to 326 a year that we put in that lockbox for renourishment, I don't see the risk of us not being able to renourish the beach on our own being being impacted.
I've got a couple more, but go ahead.
Yeah, I just want to say, we're going to discuss the beach fund independently as part of our budget conversation next meeting. So that's something.
I just wanted to point out, the other thing, when we have that discussion, and this is probably for the mayor, it would be nice to have the counties, the beach commission's numbers, so
Okay.
that we can look at that as well as real numbers from the state, so that that'll help us make our decision. Well, at least that's what I'm wanting in my head. I want all those numbers together before I make this decision. Yeah.
The county has close to $20 million.
Yeah, I'd like to.
Bill?
I think one thing that we may be missing is, let's say we reduce it by a penny this year. When are you going to take it back up?
Sure.
When are
Absolutely.
you going to take it back up?
Yeah.
You know, when you take it back up, there's going to be a tax increase. We're already looking at tax increase. I say do it at one time. People are not going to be happy for the new tax increase this year. If so, why don't we bite the bullet, do what we need to do, and then have to have another tax increase to put the sand tax back in place?
I agree.
That's my feeling.
I think it's worth recognizing what people are facing in their own lives at this point, and I think anything we can do to mitigate that, we should. I have another question on the ARP thing, and again, I probably will have eggs thrown at me about this, but
How were the last ones? They weren't bad, were they?
You want hard boiled or soft?
It's Easter.
up to you.
Next time,
Easter at that time.
The ARP money is coming to us, or we have it.
We have half of it and we'll get the second. We got about 200,000 last year.
Actually, in my report, I have a slide about what we have now, what we've committed, and what is coming. So we have
In July.
some, and then we're getting another 211 in July.
Okay,
They
and-
split it into two distributions.
Okay, so that 200 and some odd, but what do we have left for this year?
Charlene, do you mind? can you-
And it may not make that much difference.
Get my ARP slide, please.
Well, let me just go on with my point. The 211 some odd. That's money that's going to come to us, and we have, based on the final authorization, or the final, whatever they call it for the AR, the final decision. We have discretion, almost complete discretion as to what we use that for. Is that correct?
As long as it's your by state statute, as long as the town.
Correct. There are enough general categories, though, since we got less than 10 million, we can pretty well use it for whatever we want. My view is we would use the entire 200 and some odd thousand against our tax increase. I wouldn't do 100,000, I'd do 200,000. And the reason is that money, you're either going to take that money and you're going to apply it to an infrastructure project or something, and that money that's in the infrastructure project is then going to be freed up for something else, like reducing our tax,
Right.
our tax levy.
It's fungible.
It's fungible. So my sense is, assuming that the authorities allow us to use that money for whatever we want, I don't view it as free money. I just view it as, you can think of it as windfall, whatever. You can apply it wherever, but wherever you stick it in, instead of buying something on top of what you've already budgeted, you use it for something that you budgeted and then use it against your tax levy. So
If we want, just real quick so everybody knows, in your top part, just information, that bottom chart. So as of the end of last month, we have 143.8. The fourth quarter salary, using 100,000 of that in general fund and water. When we receive the second distribution, we'll be at just over $250,000.
I think we should do every single thing we can do to keep from raising our taxes or raising them at the absolute minimum.
Reserves. One other thing I'd like to point out, just again, no decisions tonight, but for the board's education. I don't have this slide in front of me, so I'm going to walk over to Charlie's brand new TV. Is that a UNC? Ramsey, is it Ramsey? Yeah, I just wanted to point out on the one consideration of using some reserves. John had asked me earlier today with the various amounts. These are designated reserves. This is nothing more than the board said of the reserves we have. The board can really change this with a vote, correct? But one of the things that we've talked about in the past is if you look at the third vehicle, that third line down, that was the fire truck down payment, which hopefully if we'll get this during FEMA excess funds approved, we're gonna buy that. So is that fungible too, John? I'm not sure what this is. I don't know all those economists.
It would free up that designated reserve, to either be put into another reserve or the general.
Right. So I'm just saying to the extent that we had identified for that need appears to be addressed with these excess fees. So just wanted to point that one out in the pocket.
And I don't know if there are any other designated funds that would be impacted by any of the grants we've applied for or any other FEMA project?
No, I looked at that. I mean, we have, I wouldn't touch the buildings reserve because something's gonna break. I mean, you could make an argument that the roofs and the buildings reserve, but the fire, the fire vehicle is one that the board might remember was what we talked specifically about a future fire truck. And I think Jason, we were talking back when we did this FY 25, I mean, 24. I mean, it was right around the corner.
There's, I agree with one of the things Clerk said in that, this budget year is pretty complicated. And, it's hard to make independent decisions without seeing the more totality of the budget. And, I think it's especially difficult because we have applied for a number of grants and we have this FEMA money, parked outside our door, somewhere outside. And we hope it's coming down the road toward us. And, so it's difficult to do a capital improvement plan in our budget. I mean, if we're conservative, we do a capital improvement plan that would be what can we afford to do, what there really needs to be done this year if we didn't get any grants or didn't get any FEMA money. Let's do, those things that are really high priorities and then, postpone, delay, everything else. But if we do get these grants, then, it will free up some more money, I think, for the general fund. But then we just don't know. I mean,
Tying it, something that you said, at least I was telling somebody this last week. This year, I think more than any other year is one where we can't, we probably shouldn't make any final decisions on the general fund budget until we talk about the water in particular. As we look at, this time last year, we said this might be the year we have to look at rate increases. Well, now this potential grant on water system improvements could impact that, at least on the base rate side. So we'll probably have to see what the 27th March meeting, 27th April meeting.
John, I've got a couple comments, not on the beach tax, but under option one, we're kicking some stuff down the road. I don't see a problem kicking the radar trailer down the road, but what about the other two? The well monitoring system and really especially the fellow. I assume that the fellow from the University of North Carolina is the same as an intern, basically. Well, in the past, we have had interns and we've gotten tremendous results out. We ended up hiring one as our town clerk. I hate to kick that down. I don't know if that sends a message to UNC that we're not interested in anymore. I don't know.
Well, on the modernization, the well monitoring modernization, never budget for hope, but it's a relatively small amount of money. And I think some resilience grant somewhere could possibly address that. I don't have one I can point to right now. We were thinking this resilient community one.
The UNC fellow was the one that really.
But this UNC fellow one that really was, the recommendation there in my mind was to address getting some things moving with the strategic plan implementing actions. And if we move forward on the personnel things that I presented to you, so we can move some positions to the front desk in the way I described it, to the tax collector and away from her desk, then I think we can do without the fellow if we go with that personnel plan.
I was thinking, one of the things that fellow could do was our own census of some sort or other. We saw, I think you all read the article in the News Times about the number of kids that living in town currently are asking us for $8,700, and there were, 100 kids under high school age. So if you figure out that there's probably another large group above that, we may have 150 children in town, which translates to a whole lot of young people in town who we really haven't got an idea what's going on. What are these people looking at? These people are the future of Pine Hill Shores. I look down this road, and we're the past.
Exactly.
Certainly not the future. Yeah, I was looking at it.
I won't argue that any bright young kid out of school
5,000 is just nothing.
This is something that ARP funds could be used
I
for
think so.
temporarily too, if we decide not to use them all for tax decreases.
That's the biggest bargain in the world.
Brian and I were talking about this survey idea today. And, we may be able to, if we advertise it correctly and make sure, we get participation of all residents. We might even be able to get like volunteers to go out, and we don't need to get detailed information. We don't need to know if you have Hispanic heritage or anything like that. We want to know if you live here, how many people are in your household, kind of what their ages are.
That's about it.
And, and not much more.
Because I wonder too, with their second homeowners, a lot of times people go in twice, like two families, so there may be 6 kids that come visit that house as opposed to 3, so be interesting.
I've got one more comment and one more question, Brian, as long as we're on budget. Are we totally going to ignore that east side sidewalk that the people are pleading for?
So I have a due out, and don't have an answer from the engineer yet. I think I mentioned this. I've asked for a cost estimate
Right.
from the Reef Stone parking lot east, strike that, from the Bermuda Greens driveway east to the Hampton Inn, maybe 100 feet. And then from Laurel Court west to Myrtle.
How many feet is that?
To Juniper, not Walnut Street. Laurel Court
So
west
they can get
to
to the
Juniper.
crosswalk.
So they get to the crosswalk.
Is
So,
that over
and
on?
that's within his study, so it shouldn't be too hard. I'm not sure what the delay is, but,
half an hour.
pardon? But I don't have that. So I plan on presenting that figure. And again, I do not have that in, but
Get the price of concrete.
What's the UDO part? Ron, you may have explained that before, and I just have forgotten. UDO and stormwater, the UDO, one of the revenue adjustments.
We're just.
yeah, using reserves for those, looking at those as one-timers.
Okay.
Last meeting, a few meetings ago, you mentioned that guys are from East Carolina who, at one point, we were testing the canal twice a year. And I guess we stopped that. I mean,
No, so the canal testing was Dr. Noble from UNC IMS. And she has a class every X number of years. Chris, help me.
Once a year.
Once a year. This year they used another town, but it's a field collection analysis test. And the last time, or 3 years ago, as you recall, might have been 4 now, she did it on the canal.
Times have passed.
But we had talked about, your request then was that we do that on a linear plan, remember? It said every X number of years. So we reached out and I think they like to go to a different town, water body occasionally.
Spread it out.
Yeah, they try to spread it out, so that's not a real, I mean, using that resource on our schedule might not
Well,
work.
that's why I want to ask the question in relationship to needs. Do you have an idea what that would cost to do it yearly, twice, at all? Any idea?
I don't even want to go out any number before.
That whole area is permanently closed for shellfishing. So I don't know how those determinations are made. I mean, every map you look on, the shoreline of.
That is mainly talking to JD Potts and Aaron, who does the testing. Some of you all met her. That's solely based on density. I mean, it's not based on past water quality. In fact, the last test that Dr. Noble came, I think some of you went to the results. The water was pretty clean. It flushes every 24 hours and but it's closed.
But what I'm trying to get to is something that's particularly important to this community, it seems to me, is to know what those waters are and in relationship to how our people who water that use their fertilizers and their nitrogens and so forth. We can poo-poo it all we want. It's probably not
Bad choice of words.
But if we go back to 1980, and maybe it's a good choice, I don't want people's attention. But if we go back to 1983 and the accusations and so forth about what went on in the canal, it seems to me in relationship to importance over a long period of time, that's a particularly important issue that we have not appropriately committed to. And I think that's something that could actually help our residents significantly.
Did you say twice a year?
But
Did you say twice a year? I mean,
I'll leave it up to the scientists to come up with that, but it's something that I would think fall and spring. I mean, just given when things happen. But I would think that's something in particular, and now it's gone on for 47 years, 37 years plus 2, so 39 years. There's been discussions about that, and we really don't know. And that information was given by Dr. Nobles and so forth over at the Marine Center. I did go to that. It was very, very interesting.
My concern is, I guess my concern is, what is our overall goal as a town board in collecting that?
It's very clear. It's to give factual information to the people who contribute to the pollution. We know that certain activities of farms pollute water.
Yeah, we understand.
We know people if I might finish, we know that people on the canal front have for 37 years, different degrees, contributed to the potential pollution that scientists back then have brought up, whether you agree with them or not. We don't know the facts.
So I guess my question is, as a governing board, do we take that data and do we write ordinances to restrict fertilization and dog poop? Is that why would we collect that data? I guess I'm trying to see what is.
Factual information is always useful to what we should do in the future.
But is that within our realm of what we can?
Very definitely. Very definitely.
Well, we could educate.
It's within.
Yeah, I would say educate without the data is it can be just as how we know fertilizer and that stuff does. We could do education without spending the money of collecting the data. That's what I'm trying to say, like, how do you?
I always
What
say
do we
make
use
decisions based on data and facts rather than just opinion. But
No, I said educate. You want to educate.
we educate based on facts, not just opinion too, don't we?
Well, I think we've got pretty good data. The fertilizer in the water is not good.
Well, we don't know what the facts are about how much is in there or not in there. That's okay, I'm just in my opinion,
Or
so.
what else is it?
What else?
One final comment. You know, the last year, I guess, with the county and the other municipalities, there was an uproar again over the division of the sales and use tax. And that's something we have to look at, consider. That could change, and if it does, a significant loss of income from that. The other thing is, I'm a pretty firm believer in you pay as you go, what you have. And if we use these other funds, to make up a deficit now, at some point, you still got to replace those funds in your budget with something else. So I don't like a tax increase more than anybody else. Working families, most are probably getting at least pay increases. Those of us with retirement, our social security increases and but the insurance increases. So, we're hit just as hard as those who are working. I just would rather bite the bullet now.
I guess I agree with Bill on that. It's, I can tell you this as a realtor. People come down here and they don't want to believe how low our taxes are because they're moving from areas where they're paying significantly more than we pay in income taxes. There's an online article, USA once a week will publish 3 houses. And the idea is, guess what the value is on that? And they publish some data on them. And I watch it just out of curiosity. None of these are major metropolitan lately, and every one of them have property taxes in the $10,000 range. We'll get into arguments with prospective buyers, and they'll say, no, I want to know the taxes for the year, not for the quarter or for the month. So I agree with Bill. All we do is dig ourselves a hole for the future if we don't pay as we go. What did you tell us last time? We're tied for the second lowest in the county. We got three towns, Moorhead, Oakford, Newport are well over 40 cents, and God knows where they're going to go from there. So we really husband the money we get, I think.
I think somewhat to Bill's point, and something that might be helpful, Julie, and help me understand it, perhaps others as well. The revaluation and the impact that's going to have on tax revenue in what year? When does the revaluation?
Fiscal year 24, 25.
So we're talking 2 years from now, okay? And that's going to go in, that's going to go into effect for both the county and for us. But it would be helpful to know what additional revenue are we looking at from that revaluation? And I recognize it's going to just be a guess. But what percentage?
It's going to be revenue neutral.
Well, I think we ought to be real careful about saying revenue neutral, because revenue neutral implies that the budget that they had in that year is not going to increase for the next year. I think there's a shell game associated with revenue neutral, and we can have that discussion later. But I'm not, again, you can throw your hard-boiled eggs at me, but that's starting point. Well, it's a starting point, and it always ends in an increase. So my thought is, how does our revenue in 2 years from now look to make up that delta that we're trying to make up now? Because Bill's right, you're going to have to pay it one way or the other. But is there going to be enough of an increase, or how much of that increase is going to be impact what we're trying to work on the deficit?
So,
And you don't have to answer that question now, but that would be helpful for us to understand.
but I think I need to react to that question for informational purposes.
Sure.
So there would be no way for me to predict what the next 2 years, what what it'll be 2 years from now to know how counties are valuing properties in the reval. I would not be able to guesstimate what that is when they come out with this new valuation. Now, that being said, back to the revenue neutral point, it's revenue. You take your, whatever the tax base is, tax values right now are just under $1 billion. Whatever your tax base is for the municipality, you are to make it revenue neutral. Your money coming in does not change. You might be writing a larger check than John is, but the money coming to me is the same.
Yeah.
Now, when you sit there and you look at growth, you can incorporate growth because your town has grown. And so there would then be some revenue increase because you have homes that are existing that weren't existing
Being
before.
developed, people
You know,
have new,
So then you,
absolutely.
right, so you
Personal property.
incorporate growth. But to predict what that number is going to be in 24, 25,
I think, I was going to simply reply that the added revenue we will see really has nothing to do with the rebound. It has entirely to do with growth. And that's worth capturing.
I think if we want to categorize it as growth, that's fine. But my view is, how do we look at, we don't have anything here that tells us what our growth is going to be next year or the year after. There's nothing that tells us that. So to get to the point that Bill's making tangentially, how do I know when I'm going to make up the deficit that we're trying to make up with different types of money at the moment? Because the ARP money is not going to be there 2 years from now. It's probably just going to be there next year, period.
Right.
So whatever's going to dry up, we're going to have to make up. But we ought to also know what our anticipated growth revenue, perhaps is another way of categorizing it, is going to be, so we know what the delta actually is.
Yeah, and again, I just don't know, because growth in real estate in the past doesn't predict the future by any stretch, because it's volatile, and right now we're in a growth period in building.
Well, it won't predict the future for prices, but it will predict the future for what you're going to pay in taxes. Because next year, if prices fall, they're not going to reval and then say another year from now, we're going to have less taxes. The reval is going to be in place regardless of your prices going down.
Right, reval in 24, 25.
We don't need it. It's just something to think about, and maybe we can talk about it at the finance committee next year.
Yeah, maybe we should have a little meeting and talk about revenue neutral and the ins and outs of it. And I think that would be good, Alicia.
So I guess I just want to reiterate that I think we need to be mindful and really cautious about every tax increase, because the reason that there's high taxes in some areas is because boards just like us kept saying, it's okay, let's just raise it a little bit more, let's raise it a little bit more. I mean, people move here, there's a mass exodus in some of these towns to these areas with lower tax values, which does help our property values. It does give us more revenue. So we need to be really careful in saying that, because we will be the next one on that board saying, oh, we are the highest tax value and all of that kind of stuff. So again, think back to those boards that were sitting here 20 years ago, 30 years ago, that kept saying, oh, let's just increase a little bit more. Let's just increase a little bit more. And then all of a sudden, they're paying these astronomical taxes in these areas. So I think we all need to be very careful and mindful of that as we go through this process.
I guess I want to take up what you said, Mayor, that maybe we should have a second discussion. Having moved from the place that you're talking about, I'm very familiar with that, and I think what towns have tended to do, the town I was from tended to do, was when things were fat, they spent a lot of money, and when things were thin, they didn't cut back on how much they spent. No fat. And so it just kind of went on up to $10,000 to $15,000 a year like it is now. On the other side, and I believe what Julie was saying, Rob, we kind of got things mixed together. The increase in valuation based on revenue neutral would mean if you didn't have additional, comparing what your budget was last year to this year, you'd have the same amount of income, period. That's modified. This town has been particularly lucky, and no one really knows, well, I don't think anyone knows exactly when the house will be completed. And then the following, like January is when it goes into effect. What, I don't know if there's been a graph kept when they're gonna be finished on December, so you know that value will come into effect. That's the only room that should have it for budget growth without a tax increase, even with revaluation. And there's no way to know that except, and that's very honestly why in the very beginning, I suggested this needs to be pushed off as much as it's a nerve game. I'm sorry, staff, but as late in May, June as possible. So we know, we have a better idea guessing what that growth is. So then we know what that delta is a little closer. And I know you're doing a good job of that, but that's the dilemma we have here. I philosophically believe that we need to be honest from the standpoint that if we have to go up on pay, and I'm an advocate that we do, we have to go up on pay, and that has to be paid whether your value goes up or whether it doesn't, whether you have 10 new houses or 2 new houses or 30 new houses. That is legitimately tax increase designation. Because we're being paid, and that's a recurring cost this year, next year, the year after, and maybe more. But we need to be able to pay that as we go along. And all of us, whether we choose to live here, need to do that. Where towns get in trouble is they have dream anxiety. And they decide they want streets 5 times as wide and twice as many lights and all that because everybody else has it. And all of a sudden their budget goes up $10 million and no new value. And so they say, well, I'm moving, so it doesn't make any difference. So lay it on the next guy, next person. And then you have that long-term issue, gee, what's happened here? I can't afford to live here anymore. So I don't, at least in my mind, I don't think anyone here is suggesting that part. So.
With respect to the growth issue that you're talking about, Robert, I think traditionally, if you look at it, and probably even in the future, the new properties that are being built, you're lucky if you keep up inflation in your budget, your expenses that you have to meet the new growth. So I don't see that as a major factor in a town this size.
Potentially, the greatest input on additional revenue than maybe this full tape and measure, more so than growth. Remember, this reval is different than the past. They're halfway through this 2-year-long process that they haven't done in 2 decades, where they allegedly have walked every property in the county. So potentially we could see increased value there. But I wouldn't use any kind of growth numbers other than issued COs. I wouldn't.
Yeah. I mean, with all the grants and the FEMA money and everything we get coming along, I think, depending on how that works out, we really don't know what our expenses will be, in the next fiscal year, the fiscal year after that. I mean, it's difficult to predict the future. And, we could, in fact, find ourselves relatively well off without a whole lot of big expenditures, just as easily as we could find ourselves behind the 8 ball. And in many ways, I think we're doing, not in all ways, because there are certain capital expenditures that will benefit future generations that I think we should pay for with borrowed money so that future generations pay for those, pay their share of those as well. But I think in many ways, if we can delay, to the extent we can delay a tax increase now whether it's using ARP money or reducing the beach tax by a penny, or using designated reserves that we may no longer need, or delaying principal pay downs for as long as we can in an inflationary period, if we have a lower interest rate. We ought to do all those things to keep our taxes as low as possible for as long as possible. And then, the next fiscal year, okay, we ran out of options. We have to raise taxes, then you have to raise taxes. But I don't know why you do them if you have other options.
Can I just say one thing about the COs and the tax values? As it relates to this budget discussion period, I would not bank on having confident numbers from county in a time period that we need to do this. Because we just received our first round of values this week, and they were values as of January 1, 22, which of course is what your tax base is off of, but it's incomplete information. And I have a list of COs that were put out in 21 that I'm going to make sure are on our tax list for this budget year, but that's not going to happen likely before we have to pass a budget. It's just, they're in dire straits in that department, and I don't want to put pressure on them. I have budgeted a very small amount of growth in the valuation number. Likely, probably, maybe not enough, but I don't know. Because of course, your building value on these COs isn't necessarily what they're going to assess the house at. So I can't necessarily use that number. So I just wanted to make the board aware that I'm not banking any money on having hard values from the county.
Okay, just for Robert's benefit, but to remind everyone, we have a history of, we passed a budget in late June, fiscal year starts on 1 July, and then we get updated tax valuations from the county in July and August after appeals. What was the 1 year we went down?
On the night that we passed the budget, they had a Board of Equalization decision on an entire neighborhood near where Mayor Brodman used to live. That adjusted down our values by a significant amount.
It lost like $60,000 in tax.
It was like that.
And based on the status of that office, I bet you it'll go past July this year.
Yeah, we're just
We're going to
concerned.
pursue this discussion at our next meeting on April 27th. Are there other things?
No, I got it down.
Right, we're not going to make any decisions. We're not being asked to make any decisions, even on your options here tonight. are we?
Yeah, Mayor, I wanted input on all of this, and I got it.
Okay.
Let's know what you got. 500 pages.
You taught those things.
It was funny,
Let's-
that's different.
Anybody has anything else on that? I would propose that we move on to the resolution, please.
Okay, so this one, I am requesting board approval. So this resolution is related to the significant water system upgrade grant that we're applying to NCDEQ for. And it's a boilerplate resolution. It reads like it's a boilerplate resolution, so we really don't have much option to change any wording. A couple of things I'll highlight. Under the now therefore it shall be reserved, that very first paragraph says the town of Pine Knoll Shores will arrange financing for all remaining costs of the project. So I spoke to him today, make sure I understood what that sentence means. If, for instance, they offer us $4 million in grant money and $1 million, Charlie, put up that cartoon, by the way. $4 million in grant money and $1 million in zero interest loans. If we sign, we accept that, and we're committing ourselves to repay back that zero interest or 1% loan or whatever, so.
We don't have to sign it.
We don't have to sign, that's correct. In the second paragraph or third paragraph down, we all go to jail if we don't repay the loan if we were to accept it. It says we'll repay the loan. And in the fourth paragraph down, you authorized myself to sign on behalf of the town. So again, we don't really have much wiggle room. If you want to add a whereas to make us feel better, then probably let us do it. But this has to be, this is part of the grant.
So after
I'll make-
you retire, we don't be taking a long look at that.
You're gone.
Oh, you know where he lives, John.
That's it. Okay.
I'll make a motion to,
Okay.
I'll make a motion to approve this.
Clark made one,
Got it.
and Bill already seconded. So any further discussion?
No.
All those in favor say aye.
Hi.
Okay, thank you.
Go get some-
Pretty much.
Next item, new business, the 10-year capital improvement plan, water enterprise fund. And I think this is the folded up piece of paper that you have back at your agenda.
So Mayor, before I start talking about this, I meant to actually make this, I'd like the public to see this for the first time, and I'm going to send out an email to this. This is so significant. This is a real significant infrastructure project for us. This is the total grant package graphically portrayed as in where the work will be. So as you can see, it's fairly significant. The different colors mean different things as far as upgrading from X-inch main to Y-inch main and such. And it involves a total replacement of our water tower right here. We received the cost estimate for all of this, a PE stamped cost estimate, again, part of the required application, and $16 million. It's a lot of money. 16.
She said 60.
16. I do not anticipate we'll receive $16 million. I think we're going to receive a smaller amount, again, of a combination of grants and loans. What we will then need to do is look at that and probably going entirely off of Sonny's recommendation, decide what of that we want to do with this grant. But it'll be fairly disruptive to folks. We've done water main projects in the right of way. It's doable, roads stay open and all that, but there's a lot of emotions involved when you're ripping up, in front of folks.
Flowers.
Yeah, so we're making the board aware of that. But anyway, Mayor, on to the agenda item. I'm going to send this out as an all hands email and Facebook post so folks know this is coming down the pike. I think I'm going to wait till the grant announcement because I think people will get confused if I put this up there now, and then a different map when we decide what we're going to do, but I'll figure something out on that. So, but again, part of the grant application, trying to be as competitive as possible. The grant application includes demonstration that we have a 10-year CIP. We have always operated off a 5-year capital plan, both general fund and water fund. So what I'm asking for your approval tonight is a 10-year CIP, which you have in front of you. You should have in large script. So the current year, just talking about it a little bit, the current year of FY 21-22, essentially, we proved that last year, of course, are this year's projects. And the large dollar one in the middle is the Salter Path Road work that we're doing right now with Rendell Engineers. From FY 23-24 through FY 25-26, the next 4 fiscal years, that is essentially the grant. Okay, that's the grant right there. A little bit of our water enterprise fund money, but it's largely the grant. Approving a capital plan, we all know this, but just to make it clear, approving the capital plan doesn't permit you to spend money in the out years, right? You approve budgets on 12 months on an annual basis. So a capital plan is just that, it's a plan. But that's what we have planned. And this will obviously be adjusted when we get the results of the grant application in July. All of the projects selected both for the grant and for the, excuse me, let me move a little further right. Then FY 26-27 through FY 30-31 are additional projects, largely, not entirely, with one exception, largely on the west end of town. West end of town lines were put in largely in the early 80s. And so we're going to address them later. Julie's presented this real clear for them, I think. By the way, the out years do not require a dollar amount now, and it would probably be a silly exercise to try to predict that right now. But all of the projects, both in the grant and in the out years, were culled from our asset management plan, which we're also getting points for, by the way. So that'll help us on the grant. So that's really it. Oh, I'm about to say, Julie has this set out fairly well. FP future projects, if you want to see, Bill, this might be of interest to you out there on the west end. You can see in those last 5 years that is mainly in the Beacons Beach area, with the exception of FP1, which is something else on the east end. So request approval of this.
Okay, question?
My question is, when those water lines are put in, they were put in by private water company.
I'm sure, yeah, they were. Yeah, they're a contractor.
So Beacons Reach, the way, maybe no one knows, the easements, I said there was a complication about easements, is they're privately owned roads.
Yes. I'd have to check, Clark. I haven't.
Well, I'm gonna say is Beacons Reach put the lines in and give them to us. You're right about that, the easements, man.
So Beacons Reach put the lines in and then gave them to the town, same way most subdivisions do.
See the concern about the
I haven't touched it.
There's something to be aware of.
I'm not certain, but I think in the master documents for Beacons Reach, the covenants of the master association, there are easements retained for utilities. That's my recollection. I have to check that. I think that's the case.
Yeah, I sent a couple of you a note I sent you a note this week about discovering an easement on a homeowner association plat. I'll answer your question by looking at the plat for Beacons Reach. There are covenants that probably has easements for them.
Also, say for all utilities, you know what I'm saying, I just want.
Yeah.
The thing you also have to check, and some previous things I had to do way before coming here, is you also, if the developer put those in without any town approval, it wasn't a town, so it didn't happen. It was a town, but it had nothing to do with the town. Since it was given to Beacons Reach, you also have to make concern about the quality of the installation and where liability comes. So that's all.
But the engineer put them in, all the lines were put in by the state, they were approved by an engineer. And so, and the certificate,
There's all kinds of engineers, but anyway.
in this county, they were put in.
It's just
So
one concern.
using Maritime Woods as an example, these lines that are still in the west end were put in the 80s. You were still here. You were here. Of course you were here. You were here. Well, my point is if Carolina Water did as good a job as he did on Maritime Woods, where he found a lot of issues with what they put in. I understand your point, though, the keyway point.
No broad sense, that's all.
Anybody else?
Yeah, go ahead, Bill. With respect to the grant application, are you breaking it down into various sections?
Yes, yes, but not geolocations. The grant's broken into, they're either categorized as replacement, and that has geolocations, and that, or expansion, in which case we're going from a 4-inch to an 8-inch or 6-inch to 8-inch. So to answer your question, the grant application is not broken into those different sections you see on that as in streets and cul-de-sacs. So when we do get, that's why I say when we do get an offer, we hope in July, we'll have to decide what's the greatest need for us.
Yeah.
Yeah, because my only concern is that third paragraph that you mentioned before. The first, the town of Pineville assures will arrange financing for all remaining costs of the project if approved. What if we don't know what they're going to approve? And it could be they approve money toward water main replacement, but not enough. If that's the case, then we're going to be responsible, if we want to do it, to pay for the addition, correct?
Yes, but the way, yes, technically that's correct, but it's not like we submitted a $16 million grant application, and if we're only offered 4, they're gonna say we're on the hook for 12 million. Definitely not that. I verified that today.
So they say, I guess it would be something like, oh, we'll give you, half of the water tank replacement, y'all are.
Potentially, potentially it gives a grant for half, we have to make a decision whether, Clark's right, we're ultimately gonna have to sign an agreement to accept that. But no question, at some point, we're gonna be committing to spend money, but I think we'll be in the driver's seat at the time.
Without land issue, you don't have to accept.
But you think that they will approve based on a certain section as opposed to just saying, okay, we'll give you 4 million toward the entire project?
I think very much the latter, because they're looking on a statewide scale, and Julie's been burning midnight oil for the past couple of weeks' work. They're considering affordability calculators based on our debt load, our annual revenues and all of that. They're not going to worry about whether we're going to Redwood Court or Yucca Court or anything like that.
Too detailed.
I don't believe, would you agree?
I think so the detail of we're going to use replacement, for example. So there's 2 grant applications, replacement and expansion. Using replacement as an example, you send the map with all your spots for replacement and you have all the costs. If they come back and say, okay, that's a whatever $8 million project, we can give you $4 million in grant and $4 million in loan. Let's say if they fully fund the whole thing. That paragraph is saying town final shores, you got to figure out how to pay your loan payment.
Yeah.
Because we're giving you a 0 interest loan. If they come back and say, okay, we can give you 6 million. Like Brian's saying, I don't think it means we then have to fund another 2. We just decide, okay, of that map, what are we spending 6 million on?
They're asking me now, Bill, they're asking me now. I saw this as a positive sign. They're asking me now, hey, Final Shores, what's the minimum amount of a grant you would accept?
60 million.
I'm a lousy poker player. I feel like if I do that, I'm going to answer that after talking to him, quite frankly, and see how important this tower and the equalization of pressure is as compared to repairing 50-year-old AC pipes, which is what he really wants to do.
Can you pick and choose among the water main replacement, for example, where you want to
Absolutely.
4 million when they approve, let's say the project's going to cost 8, they give you 4. That includes all the replacement. And you pick and choose, you have to do the whole project.
Right.
I think it'll come when they tell us what they give us and what are the stipulations. I think we can decide that once a year.
The question Brian's talking about, though, I think relates to what's the minimum grant that you will take? Because some towns will not want nor be able to take on a loan, even if it's 0 interest loan.
Yeah.
So that question is to go, if they say, hey, the minimum I can take is 16 million because I can't do any 0 interest loan, then they know what they're dealing with as far as possible.
So I asked the engineer today, in fact, I said, there an equation I should be looking at? Yeah, I mean, what's the calculus here? And they're looking at us probably against more distressed communities.
You're gonna give them grants and we're more likely to get more loan than grants.
Well, I'm not gonna go too low. I mean, I think I'm gonna make it between 8 and 10 million. I think if we say it's grant or nothing, we might be shooting ourselves.
Yeah.
Keep in mind, if we get a loan, we're talking a long-term loan for infrastructure. We're not talking about a 5 or 10 year payback.
I just made an editorial comment, and I defer to your preference on it. You might want to think about saying consistent with our recently adopted strategic plan, as opposed to just the asset management plan. The strategic plan provides a basis, I think, that's not just, we're just not creating a 10-year plan to apply for a grant. Our strategic plan gives us a guide under several of the areas that say we need to be doing this type of work. So,
No,
up to you.
that's an accurate statement. That is a very accurate statement. This is in direct support of the strategic plan, several sections of it. I just want anyone who sees this to know that we didn't just pencil with the out years. So we spent a lot of time on that.
The gator from the wheel.
I'll make a motion.
Do we have any reference to the strategic plan?
It is
It's a good idea.
backgrounds, yeah. Would you want to just add it to the memorandum and put it in the minutes?
Well, that's what I was thinking.
Okay.
You
Formulation of the 10
you know, you
Yeah, I mean, there'll be a cover letter today, so I'm going to turn that memorandum into a cover letter and everything.
No,
I'll second the motion.
okay. We have a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion?
What is the motion?
that we accept
Approve
the
the 10 years.
10-year capital improvement plan.
All right. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Yeah.
Because council, that means you can write anything you want.
Next up is the EV charging station. Charlie Roger, please.
You screw up that budget. Smile, Sean.
don't smile like that, Charlie.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So I'm not really going to go into a lot of the discussion of needs. I think Mr. Learberg did a pretty good job of covering a lot of that. Except I noticed you were asking about personal chargers that people have in their garage. I did a little bit of research on that. That's a level 1 charger. And those chargers net 3 to 5 miles to charge an hour. Whereas a level 2, which we're looking at, would net about 12 to 60 miles per hour.
12 to 60?
Yes, depending on the vehicle. So,
Charlie, the big question is where are we?
That's my question.
so the recommendation was for the public safety building.
Yeah.
A lot of parking there, right off the road, would be good access. So for financing,
Well, wait, where was the parking at the public safety building? You're not talking about the library building.
no, the area between the public safety building.
We know, I know Rosie will give us a couple.
All right, right.
Non-condominial
Parking
parking.
there now.
I mean, it's certainly possible if you want something at town hall, it probably be access and people's knowledge of it being there.
But what do people do once they plug their car in?
Go to the beach, go to the library.
Where they go?
There's public access
Go
to
to the library for 8 hours?
go to the library.
Put
They
a hot dog stand, John.
could run to Climb really, put a bike.
See, my concern is, like, we're, a municipal, small town government. We're not in the energy business. I guess if we were to have a charging station, we would presumably, like in our public beach accesses, we could lease space to the CCEC. They could put in electric charging stations that would accept credit cards for payment of the electricity. And, I don't see us putting in a public EV charging stations and then having the town pay for the electricity.
Oh,
Or any stretch of the imagination.
So we would not, is that right?
And then how ugly are these things? I mean, you know, do they look like gas? They look like gas. And,
It's like a futuristic gas pump.
futuristic.
Small, it is small.
Gas.
And they're green, so they fit in with the vegetation.
We like to fit in with the vegetation. We can landscape, right? We won't cut any vegetation down.
So I did have a conversation with Jake Joplin, the president of Carter at Craven, and currently they only own the charger in Emerald Isle next to the hotel out there that I forget the name of right now. And so what they did for that project was Emerald Isle leased that land to them to install the charger, and then they took over for maintenance and the billing. So all the money would go to Carter. That project hasn't been profitable up to this point. So Jake would be happy to propose them leasing land for this project to his board. It would take some convincing, but again, that's more down the road. That shouldn't stop us from being interested in applying for this grant. That's something that the board's interested in.
Mayor, just someone asked a question. I didn't for a minute think we were talking about the town providing free electricity. Certainly, there should be, in my view, a method for someone to pull out their plastic and pay for their electricity. I'm not sure how it's done. So, and as far as location, I've seen them before. That's where I'd recommend we put it, and you take a little bit of improvement, but I think you do it in a gravel, with simple gravel. I would, when you come into the I agree, if we do it on the highway, but you turn in off the driveway, hang a right in the lot C, and one of those first, just keep it away from Sunny's vegetation, one of those first things. I mean, it's really, as far as what's on the ground, is not much more than that program that Charlie said.
Yes, it's small.
I might want to add one little thing. When they were looking for that station that initially went in Emerald Isle, they came to me initially and asked about a public beach access. And I said that wouldn't work. Then they eventually got disinterested and decided to go to Emerald Isle. And I was teasing Jake Joplin, why'd you leave here? You know, before you presented it to you. He said, I would thought we'd have more use in Emerald Isle. 2 months later, they're having their grand opening, and he asked me to put out an all hands if there's an EV station on EV cars in Pine Knoll Shores, please send. They ended up using a Pine Knoll Shores car on for their grand opening.
So let's say if CCEC wasn't interested in leasing land for us and taking over maintenance of the thing, then we would be stuck with an EV charging station that we would have to manage, correct? We'd be getting in the energy business.
We're already in the water business.
Pardon?
We're already in the water business.
Well, yeah, that's true.
We could find other company. I know some private businesses use groups outside of ECEC to run these. I haven't spoken to any of them yet.
They have to bring the power in through CCEC.
They could put, so CCEC would put the meter in.
Yeah.
But then you could have another third party that owns it.
I guess really the question is what would be, if, just all things aside, if we didn't have credit card, what is the cost? Is there any estimates of just the electricity cost of charging a car for a line? Is there any kind of estimates where we can know?
It depends on the car, how much.
Well, I mean, it depends on the, because he's saying 3 to 5 miles, like the Tesla superchargers, I thought charged them up in a couple hours.
I think the limited reading that I did on this, and I'll be honest with you, you can throw your rotten eggs, I'm not a fan, but I could be convinced.
I'll run out.
I think it's like $16 for 100 miles worth of distance. It's about $16 to charge, and I don't know if that's on a level 1, a level 2, or a DC fast charge. I guess, do we have to have internet and or cellular connectivity on this thing if we're going to charge somebody? You can't charge, you can't have the thing not connected to some pay system. And the reason I ask is, and I'm obviously looking at the wrong thing, but I bet that the criteria is probably pretty close. This is for the zero emission DC fast charging. One of the expenditures from the grant that is not applicable is internet or cellular connection. So we would have to pay for the cellular connection. I presume that's available at the PSB.
Yes, if we were within the range there.
Okay, so we're paying to have that connected. The town's having to pay that connected.
Right.
Sorry.
Our Wi-Fi can't connect to the back parking lot to our police cars through the building, so
My
I just
point,
want
though, we
to
have
put
to
that
have
out
a
there.
grade in order to do, I'm a little concerned about what we're buying into here because of the way this is explained on the North Carolina DEQ website as addressing distance anxiety
Yes.
for people who buy, look, I had a hybrid. I got 50 miles to the gallon on that car. I'm all for electric hybrid stuff. But I'm a little concerned that we are, as explained by the speaker earlier, why his particular association doesn't consider this something that applies to everybody. One of the questions that I would have is, and this would probably be a legal question, if we agree to this, what other types of accesses from public interest groups would we be required to accommodate because we accommodated this one? And that may be a stretch, but I could be convinced to do this. There are just a lot of things in here that I'm a little queasy about.
It's a long extension.
I was gonna say, can you run a drop board from the public safety building?
You see all kinds of problems with it, and there's only one station and you got 3 people want to use it. And all of a sudden we've got the police department because it takes hours to charge it up enough. And people are arguing and we're involved in that. I think John's right. I don't know if we want to be in the other.
It's burst into flames.
I just got one.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah, I just want to know, is there, like, you've got grant money here to install it and put it in, but is there possibilities of grant money for the electric company to allow for free charging and stuff? Kind of like, is that a possibility?
I definitely don't think that's the way.
You know, I think they're a good idea. They're needed obviously some places, but we're a small community. We're better suited if we're Atlantic Beach and one each end of the island. You know, they're more populous areas rather than we have, you know, all the expense of putting it in, even though there's a grant, but operating it and all the problems with it. Atlantic Beach, you know, they had one down there that people can plug in their cars, and once they have to stay there, they go down and walk over to the beach or something like that, do other things. Here, what are they gonna do? Can you plug it in, leave your car? You have to stay with it. I don't know.
But the point is that the Minor Shores residents are the ones that are buying these vehicles because they are more conscious of environmental concerns. Well, I'm just making a point that is one of the arguments there, is that they're the ones buying these vehicles, and that's why they choose Minor Shores.
I think all the concerns are valid for this. I think part of the reason for those concerns is that this is a very contemporary issue that a lot of things haven't been resolved for yet. I think if you're looking long-term, this is something that eventually it's going to be here, whether we like it or not. So it's up to the board, that's something we want to jump on early, or maybe let the market decide.
Mayor, just what I'd like to ask that the board consider tonight is that you all shoot Charlie specific questions that you want him to answer on this. And we'll try to do some research in 2 weeks prior to the 27th.
Okay.
But I do want to say clear, a lot of people are saying us getting the business set from the beginning. I thought this was either EMC being the business person or third person party. I don't think for a second the public should be subsidizing this. We would be facilitating something for the environment and all of that. And we find the Acme EV charging station company and we have them put it in. The question we'll have to find out what the grant deadline is. There's RFPs involved and all of that. Could we apply for the grant and make it conditional on us finding a third party that pays for installation, that pays for Wi-Fi connections, yada, 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 yada. And then it's their business. It's a mini commercial spot, which is a good point, zoning. A mini commercial spot over in Lot C. I don't think for a second, given everything we talked about the first hour of the meeting, that town should be paying to refuel electric cars.
One of the things, if I could, and I'm obviously, Charlie, looking at the wrong thing. I'm looking at the DC fast charging. If you can get the RFP for the level 2, because it details all the stuff that we haven't even talked about here, it would be helpful for us to be able to go through it. For anybody that wants it,
Sure.
I would like to see it so that I can kind of go through it.
I know that DC charger is a step above the level 2.
Right. So that's why I'm thinking there may be more in here that they require for the fast charging than the level 2. But if we're going to do something like have it charged, because my view would be, if we put something like this in, I want whoever's charging off of it to pay for my Wi-Fi. I want all of those costs to be calculated into whatever it is we're charging. Because quite frankly, I hadn't thought about that. It is kind of another little commercial business sitting there, and that's,
It's got to at least break even.
well, yeah, and I don't know how to structure a paid structure to do that.
I mean, there's a church on Bridges Street that just put one in their
Yes.
parking lot. And I figured it's a trying to build a tent or something.
Universal Unitarian Church, the Salvation Army. They might have some
Insight.
insight.
Yeah, I don't know, we need a lot more information.
Anybody else?
Can you always apply and just refuse and things don't pull together?
So we'll pick this up again in 2 weeks.
Yeah.
But in the meantime,
I could go ahead and work on grant applications. You're not obligated to.
Yeah,
right.
We don't have to say it first.
Correct.
okay, thank you. You gonna touch on the next one too, Charlie? Well, we'll go into that.
Yeah, I know you were interested in, talk about it.
Okay. The History Museum of Carteret County, which is, I understand, helping us out on our 50th anniversary program. I believe they've already taken a number of photographs and things that our history committee has had and have blown them up. And then, a couple of years ago, they did that nice exhibit on the shores, the beach down in the forest, it was a really a big hit. And we were the first of a series of towns in Carteret County that the Historical Museum featured. And then just more recently, they did this program called Anchoring Our Past to the Present. And it was a really great show with a new film narrated by Rodney Kemp, interviewing a number of old timers all around the county. That was really well put together. And they've come forward now and asked us if we could give them a grant of, $1,000 or $1,500 as kind of a community support appreciation contribution to the work they're doing. And they would be more than happy, I'm sure, to continue to work with us on our 50th anniversary and a number of other things. And I personally kind of look at this similar to the $1,500 we give every year to the Bowbanks Public Library branch. It's kind of a community outreach support kind of a thing. And I'll just leave it at that. And I don't know if people have any comments or questions about it?
I think I should probably involve myself in this discussion too. This,
I think it's a great idea to it.
So I think I probably should.
Yeah, I make a motion, $1,000. You know, I'll make a motion, we approve it for $1,000.
Second that.
Any further discussion?
That's a good idea.
Okay, all those in favor say aye. All those opposed?
No vote.
Okay, just note that Clark and Robert have recused themselves from that discussion. And I'm sure they'll be happy. My arm was being twisted to the 1,500, but so be it. Let's see, where are we? Okay, town manager and staff reports. Town manager Kramer, please.
Time yourself, Todd.
No. Things that has going on. So, good evening again. Go ahead, hit my slide, please. For the Okay, go forward. First item is to talk that
That's online.
the large DEQ grant, and we've already hit most of my talking points. Again, $16 million, again, likely some grant and some loan. And again, like I've been asked to provide to them what's the minimum amount of a grant we would accept. The timeline, I just wanted to quickly mention the application package is going to be done on the 22nd. We're going to have a review with the DEQ folks, myself. I'll probably pull Julie and Sonny in on it as well with DEQ prior to formal submission. And the engineering firm that's based out of Charlotte is going to have that in. And the results come out in July. So my point is, this is likely, correction, this is certainly going to affect our Water Enterprise Fund budget work. Most specifically, well, Julie and I were talking, it will affect considerations for rates and as well as base rates, usage rates and base rates. So that's really all I have on that, but I hit most of those earlier, so that's all I have.
I have any questions for Brian on the grant water? Okay, thank you.
So on the Department of Emergency Management, NC Department of Emergency Management grant, we submitted that on 29 March. We're going to find out on that. We're going to get the results the week of 16 to 20 May. I'll then sometime, this is a large window, which tells me they're kind of doing this on the fly. Sometime between May and July, they're going to present the grant agreement. And I'll get that in front of the board, of course, before I sign it. So my plan going forward is to try to get the easements this summer and construct those two lines on Arborvitae Court and Cedar this winter. And again, that's 100% grant funded. So keep my fingers crossed on that. That's all I have on that one, John.
Questions on that?
I want to brief the board and the public on the discussion we had with East Coast Greenway. Folks will remember that during the sidewalk meeting, there was a gentleman over where Sonny's sitting now from an Emerald Isle bike group, bicycle riding group. They asked us, would we be interested in talking to the Greenway specifically about sidewalk funding? So we said, well, of course we're interested in that. So we met with them last week via Zoom, Clerk, John and I. This past Long Session, the General Assembly programmed $29 million to NC Parks and Rec for trails. The East Coast Greenway, in turn, receiving $4.7 million of that. So really, we're talking about $4.7 million from this Greenway funding. So the Greenway, I talked to them again as a follow-up, John and Clark, this morning to make sure I My notes were good. The East Coast Greenway is going to present a plan, a statewide plan, this summer, this July. And this will include several dozens of projects for funding to use that $4.7 million. Okay. So they're going to choose projects this summer. And then funds have to be encumbered, not spent, but encumbered by July of 2023. Bogue Banks is on the route of the Greenway already, whether we know it or not. Our 4.5 miles is on the Greenway map. Now they're trying to find a way to put in greenways there, trails there, specifically using this money. And they pointed out, at least maybe they say this to everyone that calls, and they said Bogue Banks is a priority. That's what they told us in our conference call. This money, the Greenways promotion, this money would not be used for concrete or asphalt. I want to emphasize that, not concrete or asphalt. The substance they mentioned repeatedly, and I asked them, are there any other options? And they said no, is packed stone dust trail, which they have in some urban settings or parks in urban settings and such. I asked the gentleman if he knew if that was pervious or not, and he did not. But such a trail would need to be 10 to 12 feet wide. Okay, has to be eligible for this. So that's a major difference from our 5-foot wide concrete sidewalk. About $500,000 a mile. $500,000 a mile was the estimate I gave him. And I asked him, well, what's your estimate for concrete and asphalt? And of course, they went high because that's not what they like. And so I don't know about this number. They said about $2.5 million a mile for sidewalks. I think that's a little on the high side, but immediate concern from me is maintenance. Because I've seen not this necessarily this packed stone dust substance, but on a lot of natural trails, when we get gully washer rains, they form little rivulets, if you will. So if we were to consider this, and we've been going back and forth, but I would only consider this on the south side of the road, only because 10 to 12 feet of trail really means 15 to 18 feet of land disturbance, if not a little more. So it'd be pretty significant. And then, of course, we have the issue of Carteret Craven's 3 to 5 years away. They've been telling us that for 5 years, 3 to 5 years away. I'm going to go to Carteret Craven and say, if I waved the magic wand 3 to 5 years from now, at the far end of the right of way on the south end of the road, there was a crushed stone, packed stone dust trail.
Which I'll hear it.
Could you still do what you need to do to your lines and pole replacements and not impact that? I just want to see what the answer to that is. So I'm not recommending we tell them we're on board with this, but I'm going to call them tomorrow if the board has any comments on this, as in don't even make the phone call or tell them we're not interested. But I think it'd be worthwhile. I'd be interested to know from Carteret Craven what the answer to that is.
Get it clear under the line so they can replace the poles.
They might say, have at it. That's less clear.
They're going to say, you're going to clear it for us. So, we like your idea, but.
Really what I'm interested in, Robert, is, yes, of course, I think that's why they would love it. But what I want to know is, would they destroy it in the process of replacing their lines and their poles? No, I don't know the answer to that.
And you'll be retired by then, so the people on the south side of the road whose backyards this thing would be in won't be able to reach it, right?
My first draft of the 10-year CIP was everything after 2024 doesn't matter.
I know. So really a couple I guess I worry about the aesthetics too of not just that, but like it doesn't match anything else on the island as we're coming down there. But why, I mean, $29 million in trail grant, are we not even considering that this might be perfect for the public safety building to the clam digger as opposed to through residential stuff? Because we really have more leeway there, and it would maybe be hidden a little bit if we could go in. It's state funds. The state might approve that. It is trail money too. It's not sidewalk money.
Right. Well, we never got a north-south head nod from Parks and Rec about the PSB to the Clam Digger Nature Trail.
But if we got grant money from North Carolina Park, what is the name of the organization? What's NCGA?
Well, NCGA is the General Assembly, but East Coast Greenway Association.
But this saying $29 million to trail construction, not even counting the greenway.
And that's statewide.
That's statewide.
And the East Coast Greenway
got 4.7.
is specifically getting that.
So, I mean, we could go after both sets of money if we had a decent trail plan for
I don't know who you go to.
the $29 million to trail construction. You find out where they're sending
Well,
that.
state parks and rec.
States Parks
will
and Rec. But I'm just saying, to me, for this particular project, that would be a much more aesthetically pleasing and kind of thought that we had. So you're not putting a 10 to 12 foot gravel multi-use path, like you said, in somebody's backyard down the highway. Because I think down the highway, it would look odd.
If I'm right, it doesn't look like gravel. I've ridden the Virginia Creeper Trail a couple of times, and I think that's the same construction. And it looks like it's pavement almost. But I have no idea what the maintenance on it would be, which could be significant.
Well, there's a couple of things.
Yes, but that's just for the greenway. This is for trails anywhere.
One of the things, since we had discussion with
Yeah,
down
but
here,
there's this money that you can go after for just.
who controls that parks?
Who's down here? I'm sorry.
Roosevelt from the public service
State
building.
parks.
State Parks and Rec.
Okay, North Carolina Parks and Rec just endorsed this other program.
Yeah.
About 4 months ago, 5 months ago. So maybe there's some communication gaps there. The other thing I question, I heard what he said the other day about service and all that. I think some clarification needs to be determined there also, because I believe East Coast Greenways is incorporated, maybe if you check with MLIL, they've incorporated their multi-use trail into the program.
No, so I misstated that. The East Coast Greenway doesn't require their entire greenway to be natural. That can be cement. Remember the first comment, it's across bridges in some places.
Right. No,
But to tap into this fund,
It has to
these
be.
funds, excuse me, it
But
requires.
I just
it can't
wonder if
be-
there's not a range of funds of potential there. I mean, even the way he was very careful, the way he worded it. And because when you asked him because you asked him the question, how much per mile? How much per mile? The surface is only a portion of what the cost, the basic cost up to you put the final surface.
Right.
He didn't really answer that. I listened very carefully to that, sitting in the chair with it. He didn't really answer that. He answered something about the packed stone and so forth. So that was with packed stone, without it, what was it? What's the difference? All that type of thing. I'm familiar with previous experience that, I don't know what it is today, but previously concrete was about 2 or 3 to 1 compared to asphalt versus. And I know your feelings about that. But one of the reasons is that you can use an 8 foot, if you were doing 8 feet, you can use an 8 foot asphalt spreader, where with concrete, you have to put it all in with, level it all out individually, or anything less than 8 feet, you have to do it manually. So it's a whole big, lots of things, the differences in prices. But I just think we have to make sure our communication, I'm taking up what was said earlier in the meeting, our communication is on the same topic. with everything. That's all.
I came away from this feeling like there wasn't much there for us,
Mm-mm.
myself.
I think they really are trying to direct it.
Well, or, I mean, if there were anything in it for us, it would be the PSB too.
I think it would be.
And that would be something the aquarium should probably be asking for.
Yeah.
I mean,
Well, we could go to like a partnership or something.
I will inquire not with the Greenway, but with Parks and Rec about whether any of their total 27 million would be considered for that. But I repeat, we never
heard back.
remember that large meeting we had in here with the Fort Macon folks and all that. We never heard back.
But my
from
thing
them.
is it might put, if you get a grant, it might put a little bit of pressure on them to.
Right. So I have, no, I do have one more, actually two more. So I've got a draft letter for Mayor to sign. I've got a draft letter for the mayor to sign, the Secretary Beiser, the Secretary of DEQ, asking for relief on the brown yard waste bags. I'm waiting to hear from the subject matter expert we talked about, but no sooner did I draft that than I got several complaints today or 2 days ago about why we still haven't had approval or haven't had that changed yet. But Neil's recommendation, I think it's a good recommendation. Before we pack a car full of people and go in front of this Environmental Management Commission, we just ask her to apply common sense here. So that's what we're going to try to do.
Good. Common sense.
Government.
Last thing, Mayor, I left off this, but Ted mentioned it, and I'm not asking for a decision, but I want the board to just, again, brief this publicly. The request from Morehead City for consideration of funding for school resource officer for the 3 K through 8 schools in Morehead. And I can't remember what they all are. K through 8.
Middle, that's the 3. Yeah.
That's a 3. Yeah. And it's not including high schools. So they've asked for $8,500. What I've told their town manager is we're going to have to, city managers, we're going to have to look at this in the construct of the whole budget. Because this likely would be a reoccurring request, unlike the history thing, I'm sure.
So back up. All right. So Morehead, not the Board of Education, is coming to us. So the Board of Education doesn't fund resource officers.
No, the state funds 100% school resource officers at high schools.
But not.
The state funds a portion of school resource officers K through 8. Morehead City and the county provides some funding for Morehead K through 8 school resource officers.
And Morehead's already pitching in for a resource officer
and they believe
to the county.
Yeah,
Okay.
well, Morehead's paying the predominant share of it. And the western towns, Cape Carteret went to Bogue, Pelletier, the western towns, and asked them to kick in and they have.
So Morehead's asking Atlantic Beach, Pineville
Correct.
Shores, Indian Beach, Newport.
I only know of the island towns.
Oh, no, not Newport.
I only
They have
know
their
of of the island towns. I'm not sure. Newport has their own.
Yeah, they have their, I'm sorry, they have their own
Doing it
middle
by
school.
Head count.
Doing it by student count. And the student count numbers are surprising. We have significantly more school children in Atlantic Beach. I thought that was interesting.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Comes some money.
So anyway, I want to make the board aware and the public aware that that request has been made. I've told them it's a tough budget year and we'll look at it. I don't have a recommendation right now, but this would be recurring.
Would we be the only ones that weren't chipping in?
I don't know what Atlantic Beach is going to do yet.
Yeah.
I might call them and let you guys know in 2 weeks.
I'll talk to Trace. Yeah.
That is all I have.
You know, if
I feel
it's,
like it's a Board of Education thing.
I don't know why
Why is that
county can't,
torque me?
That's a county function.
Yeah.
can't kind of, I don't know, put it in their budget.
John, all the towns have been fighting the county for SRO money
What did they
since they
ask?
started with them.
They run the school.
They've also asked us to put something on the water tower so that they don't have to buy new equipment. Sorry.
Can we pick that one up again?
Yeah.
Yeah.
We'll find out what it'll be.
Okay, thank you. Finance Officer, Assistant Town Manager, Julie, please.
Okay, so just a couple quick slides. This is just an update on tax collections. We have advertised in the newspaper the unpaid or delinquent taxpayers. Current year, we're just a smidge, really, to me, that's almost the same collection rate when you're under a 1% difference between prior year. So not a huge difference between this year and last year. And again, just to reiterate, this shows you how much we bring in total tax levy on the beach tax is about $326,000 currently of just the tax levy, not sales and use tax. So there's that. Next slide, Charlie, please. And this one I talked about a little bit earlier, but I'm going to address the top part of this slide. So the first report is due to the United States Treasury on April 22nd regarding ARP funds and what we've spent so far, all of that stuff, and kind of the preliminary paperwork part. On this first go around is when I select the standard allowance, which, as I said, is if you received under 10 million, you select standard allowance. And that doesn't mean that you only can spend your money under the standard allowance. That's just saying we're claiming that. And then just a summary of board authorized expenditures to date, or the premium pay in December. COVID related supplies for first responders, basically for Jason's department, which has been a small amount. I want to say maybe under $5,000 so far. I can't remember exactly the amount, maybe a little more than that. And then the fourth quarter FY22 salary adjustments. And I went over that bottom chart earlier, but just as a review, at the end of this fiscal year we're in right now, we should have about $44,000 sitting in there. We'll get the second distribution expected in July. That's when we received it last year. And then we'll sit at just over $250,000 after that. And then another part of the transition plan, Charlie, if you'll go to the next slide. This is Brian's third career. June 2024, he's going to work part-time for Sunny. So it's going to be role reversal and clean the sidewalks. So he can maintain that, that trail that we were just talking about. He can be the maintenance guy on the trail.
Did you add that in your resume, Brian?
Wear a chain in
Yellow bit.
Oh, then that's all I have. I know.
Any questions for Julie?
No.
Yeah.
Thank you.
All right, thank you, Julie. Okay, Jason.
Good
one,
Julie.
I'm good and actually see it. Evening. All right, just like budget stuff we talk about annually. I feel like a broken record because now we're talking about hurricanes again. But real quick on hurricanes, I always say we wait too late to think about them, for our own personal houses and stuff. And, you really should be prepping your stuff now, at least thinking about it and thinking about a plan, what you're going to do when they come. The biggest thing I wanted to say is there's going to be a Hurricane Expo on May the 10th, which is actually my birthday, from 9 to 1 at Crystal Coast Civic Center. Noah's doing it. It's free to the public. I'm sure it's a ton of good info, and I think it's gonna be a really cool thing. They've not done anything like this in the past that I can remember. So, they try to get the awareness out there. We will be doing our annual Final Shores version here. Thank God we can do it in person this year, because that online stuff is crazy. I just gotta get dates. I usually try to drag Noah in if possible to help out.
On the expo, can we put out an all hands memo?
That's what I was,
Yeah, gonna do that.
Yeah. And on Facebook and stuff too. So be sure to check out Facebook stuff. If you ain't checked out the,
Oh my
what we're doing on
gosh.
Facebook stuff, you watching Jerry do it.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's kind of cool.
It looks good.
He's a firebrand when it comes to that stuff. He loves public education and stuff, and that's one of the main reasons that I snagged him. He's doing real well with it. There's going to be some really cool water rescue stuff that Jerry's working on. He's making like a QR code that people can scan at any point in time on your phone, so you can check. He's trying to get those into the rental houses and stuff, but things like that, you know. So a lot of good stuff we're doing with water rescue as well. But just kind of want to hit on hurricanes, and if y'all can, you know, personally spread the word about the expo, that'd be awesome in town.
Thank you. I had a question.
Yes, sir.
Can you comment on why rescues almost doubled over last year? Went from 29 to 50 this year?
Just in recently, just people getting hurt. What it is, I mean,
be careful.
maybe people getting older, people not being careful. I mean, it
Marge.
goes up and it goes up and down.
Could be.
Getting older, I think. If you find it, if you find a way, let me know.
Getting over a problem.
We got the new ambulance.
There are 2 days in your life that you don't get 24 hours. Day you're born, day you die.
Well, thanks, Jason.
Thanks.
Drop the mic.
I just wanted to thank you. I enjoy those weekly 1 or 2 minute videos your staff and so forth putting on.
And that's Jerry and Tanner and Brooks. I got the Cal, you know, one of the big things, like I've been trying to get this boy Jerry for a long time, and finally was able to snag him back from Jacksonville. And he's a great paramedic. He's a great fireman. He's really huge public education. He loves that stuff, and he's really focused. He's really intense, and sometimes you got to calm him down. But when I got him, I said, "This is what I want you to do. This is what I want you to focus on." And he's just run with it. You know, just great ideas.
I think it's great.
It's
But the
fun
public
stuff.
is calling for you.
He has learned. See, one of
Not
the
done
things
a
he said,
video yet?
no, one of the things he says, I don't like doing that stuff. I'm not a big in public person, if y'all don't know that by now, but he goes and he says he went on a line to find pictures of me or, you know, some of the stuff from the news and the stuff. And he said, I found all kinds of stuff on Ron Thompson. He said, I can't find anything of you.
You're doing something, but my public demand is on you.
I don't know. It's tough being sexy, but.
Thompson.
Hey, good evening, everybody.
And
Just a quick snapshot of our March arrests and charges, 2 driving impaired charges, and 1 arrest for communicating threats and 2nd-degree trespass. So I started putting this in every month just so you guys can kind of see, you know, instead of just seeing blanket arrest numbers, kind of what we're encountering more frequently. Last month, we promoted Dakota Weathers to sergeant. I was very happy to do that. He's been with us for almost 5 years. Just an outstanding young man. He was in the Navy prior to coming to us. He came here as kind of an empty slate, and then now he's got his bachelor's degree. He's got an intermediate certificate. He's a DRE. He's an EMT basic. And so just a great, great guy that's going to be the future of leadership within our department, I'm certain. So very happy, very excited to do that. Charlie, next slide. So we've got a speed sign on loan to us from the Governor Highway Safety Program. And so we had it for 8 days out on Oakleaf in between the country club and in between Highway 58, facing to measure the eastbound traffic. So during that time period, it measured almost 3,300 vehicles. Out of those vehicles, the average speed of all of them was 21.56 miles an hour. The 85th percentile speed was 26 miles an hour, which means 85% of those vehicles are traveling at 26 miles an hour or less. And 55% of the vehicles slowed down when the sign displayed the speed.
Yeah.
So important to note that out of those almost 3,300 vehicles, only 7 were exceeding 35 miles an hour.
That's incredible.
35.
Yeah. So our next 8-day study we did was on Mimosa. It was facing the northbound traffic. We measured almost 2,800 vehicles. The average speed was 19.28 miles an hour. The 85th percentile speed was 24.76 miles an hour, which is below the speed limit. 71% of the vehicles slowed down when they saw the speed sign, which is again, just kind of demonstrating its effectiveness and not just collecting data, but actually getting them to slow down. And out of those 2,800 vehicles, only 4 were above 35. And I'm 100% confident that all 4 of those are probably first responders going to, because we had a number of EMS calls down in that area during that time period.
It was me on my bicycle.
John was really booking that day.
There, you know, on Mimosa, there are all those kind of dips and potholes in there.
So interesting, in the past, when we've done these speed studies, Mimosa was worse than Oakleaf. And so I was surprised to see it kind of flip
It's
backwards this
straight.
time.
But I think there's so much foot traffic and stuff. People do slow down.
Right. And, you know, this sign's got a little bit more capability than our old sign. We couldn't measure how many vehicles actually slow down. I think that's maybe the most useful metric, showing that, you know, they are a useful tool. So and right now it's on Willow. We were getting a number of complaints on Willow, and so it's there, and then we're going to put it out on Highway 58 for a week, because we haven't collected any data on Highway 58. And we're going to continue to use this sign until somebody from Governor's Highway Safety comes and takes it back from me.
Where are you going to put it on 58?
We're going to
Go down Oakley, Robert.
Reach.
we're going to try to do it in 2 different areas. We're going to split it up a week in each area. One facing the traffic coming out of Atlantic Beach, showing that more dense area on the east end of town, and on the west end of town facing traffic coming out of Indian Beach. So capturing data on both sides of the town, on both sides of the roadway. And then, like I said, the sky's the limit. We can keep putting it everywhere until somebody comes and takes it back from me.
I put a trail camera on that sign on the west end of town.
Hey, interestingly enough, it's got a theft monitor on it. So if somebody, or a tamper camera, and the data
somebody
is
tries to
transmitted
steal it.
wirelessly. So if somebody goes to try to steal it, then it takes pictures and video of it.
Gotcha.
Say all the commissioners will be on there.
Does it give times, like, for instance, of the 5, whatever the number was?
It does give times, and
So
it
you can tell when they went over the speed limit?
yes, and so not shockingly enough, around the 8 o'clock hour, presumably when I think a lot of construction traffic is going to work, lunchtime hour, and then 5 o'clock.
Oh,
So,
funny.
That's why I was interested.
Yeah, so really those 3 time segments are the, and it was matched on Oakleaf and Mimosa. Those 3 time segments were the most, where the most violations were. But I was very happy with the numbers as far as the ones exceeding 10 miles an hour over.
That's useful in deploying too, of course.
It is.
Good.
Last slide, Charlie. April 30th, we're doing a community cookout. We haven't done one in a couple years. We used to call them Cookout with the Cops. Jerry has gotten very heavily involved in this with us. And so we're calling it Burgers, Boots, and Badges. It's going to be at the Public Safety Building in the parking lot area, the side parking lot area of kind of like the area of Condell Realty. It's a rain or shine event. We got plenty of room in the bays for tables if it does rain. We've got a lot of stuff donated from some local businesses, which is great. And hoping to have 250 or 300 people out that day to eat some hamburgers, hot dogs. We're going to have a lot of activities for kids and just some good fellowship and just meeting and speaking with folks and serving them some hot dogs and hamburgers.
Okay, thank you.
Nice.
Anybody? Okay. Are you coming to our next budget meeting or?
I'm doing whatever my boss tells me to.
Okay.
I haven't thought about it, to be honest, but Sunny for sure.
Okay. We're talking mostly water.
Water and beach.
Okay. I'll get to you separate about it. Different issue out of the budget. Thank you. Okay, Sonny, please. Sonny Cunningham, the Director of our Public Services Department.
Good evening. We got our truck back this week. And we used it wisely. Saved us like 2 or 3 days of work this week. The local water supply plan has been completed. And we found out that since last year, we gallons per day went up 37,000 per day one year. It's a lot of water. Anyway, Julie has now 9.5 million gallons of money. I helped her a little bit there. Revenue. Right now, the aquarium's having some trouble at their place, and they're losing 1.4 gallons per minute. But that's 2016 a day, 60 gallons, 60,000 a month, 725,000 a year. So rural water's going to help them for free. So we're going to help them out. Okay.
Okay.
No charge them. The CCRs will be, the customer confidence report will be going out the 20th. And you have any questions or anything?
Questions for Sonny?
Confident, is that like a survey that goes with the bill or?
It's a flash of the analysis for the previous year.
Oh, gotcha. That's what I remember.
Snapshot, really, that's what
Yeah.
it's called. So it's going to be on the website, and God's going to help us look it up.
Awesome.
So, but thank you for letting us get the truck fixed.
All right.
We
Thank you,
appreciate that so
Yay.
much. You have any questions, let me know.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thanks. Charlie, do you have anything? Pardon?
Kevin.
Kevin, oh yeah. Kevin online?
Mr. Mayor, can you all hear me?
We can.
Yes.
Hey, good evening, everyone. Just a few items. We do have a preliminary survey in hand for the town hall complex. It's primarily a topographical survey at this point. You all may recall this survey was ordered in order to help us prepare a preliminary site plan for the public services building in order to tap in the excess FEMA funding. We're very fortunate to have that in hand. I have not conducted a thorough review of it yet, but it will be the basis for which we do a site plan to help satisfy some FEMA requirements for Sonny's new building, which is much needed. With regard to the Unified Development Ordinance, the Planning Board did review 9 articles with rich flow at its March meeting. You all may recall that the concept was to introduce articles one month, review them next month and whatnot. There were no new articles introduced during the month of March due to some health issues on Rick's side, but there will be new articles presented to the Planning Board at its April meeting, and we'll continue that process of providing feedback each month when the articles introduced the previous month, and continue the process of building the UDO one article at a time and filling up those large notebooks that we all have. With regard to Town Hall steps and Beach Access A, I do expect to have in hand very soon the final plans for all 3 accesses to Town Hall as well as the beach access. Those plans will be used to put together a bid package. The thought process is we'll bid the entrances to Town Hall initially. We will work out a phasing process for when those steps are removed and reconstructed to minimize disruption for both the public and anyone else visiting Town Hall. And then the plan would be to bid the beach access following the busy season of this year, which would be hopefully sometime in the fall. I don't say tourist season anymore because folks don't seem to leave, but hopefully we'll be a little bit more busy in the summer as normal. But that's all I have on that slide. If you have any questions before we move on to the next one.
Any questions for Kevin?
No.
Okay, Kevin, move on.
Thank you. All right, North Carolina Resilient Coastal Communities Program. We're wrapping up that project. You all recall that was funding through Division of Coastal Management that provided consulting services to us. The Community Action Team conducted their final meeting on April the 5th. There were a number of projects ranked. The number 1 project, nature-based or hybrid stormage solutions. There was not a specific project area identified yet, but that is the project category that we think will probably be most competitive as we move forward for hopefully some additional grant funding. Dewberry, our consultant, is preparing the final report to DCM. That final report's really going to complete phase 1 and phase 2 of the resiliency community program. The next step would be phase 3. That application process has been opened with applications deadline being June 3rd. We do anticipate staff coming back to the Board of Commissioners with a request to submit a phase 3 application. Phase 3 will fund engineering design of a single project to hopefully get that project shovel ready, for lack of a better phrase. Phase 4, uncertain at this point. The reason I say may provide for an application process for construction when we question DCM staff, will phase 4 have funding with it? At this point, it's unknown, but at least we will have, if we're successful, through phase 3, we will at least have the engineering design work completed for a single project that hopefully we can implement in town. That's all I have on that slide. If you've got any questions.
Any questions? No. Move on.
All right, last town planner slide. As always, single-family landscape permit applications remain very robust. We issued one so far this month following a special meeting of the CAC. I can't say again how much I appreciate the CAC in the last year as construction picked up, being willing to conduct special meetings, and they have done so. So the one issued so far this month has brought the year-to-date total to 23 new single-family homes. As a reminder, we issued 17 in all of last fiscal year. We currently have 4 under review. And as I say every month, Jim and I are consistently in discussions with folks, and we anticipate applications to continue to come in. There doesn't seem to be any slowdown or any pause in construction activity in PKS or elsewhere for that matter. Seawall and bulkhead inspection. It's been a while since it's been done, but staff is going to conduct an inspection of seawalls and bulkheads via a boat tour of the waterway. Ideally, this is done obviously on a nice day, but more importantly, at dead low tide. The idea is to get a real good picture of where we have bulkheads and seawalls that are not in compliance with town code regulations. Specifically, they're failing. Following that inspection process, we do anticipate notifying property owners that they must repair those that aren't in compliance with the town code. We'll obviously start off with notifying them and seeking voluntary compliance. In the absence of that, we do have the ability to proceed with notices of violation and actually begin to mandate the repairs. But don't know how many will be out there, but certainly I imagine we'll find quite a few that do need to be touched up. The key issue is going to be where we find walls and seawalls and bulkheads in such a position that's allowing silting and things to wash into the canal, which we obviously don't want to protect the integrity of the canal and the waterway. That's all I have on that item, and that's the last of the town planner information so far.
I want to say thank you for doing the
Kevin,
bulk.
if our town manager had his Grady White with the twin 250s on it, he could do it pretty quickly for you.
And I was just going to say
Yeah, I
thanks.
wouldn't mind riding on.
Thanks for doing that, because I did notice several of them that were failing.
Yeah, we look forward to doing that. We've responded on a lot by lot basis when we get complaints, but we haven't done a thorough ride through the waterway in quite some time.
You don't have a date yet?
I do not have a date yet. Town manager tasked me with trying to accomplish it this month. Obviously, I'm a little out of pocket right now, thanks to COVID, but hopefully I'll be back in the saddle here pretty soon.
Okay. Thanks.
Okay. Building inspector, Kevin Reed.
Yes, sir. Putting on the Jim Taylor hat in the month of March, 14 building permits issued, a total value $1,336,362. Issued 10 mechanical permits, 7 electrical permits, and 4 plumbing permits. Total value of all permits issued was $1,414,529, and issued 21 tree removal permits. And it shouldn't be a surprise given the construction activity that there was 178 inspections performed for the month of March. Clearly, that reflects the robust building activity in PKS.
Okay, are there any questions for Kevin on the building inspector side of things? No. Okay, well, Kevin, thank you very much, and take care of yourself.
All right, thank you all. Have a good evening.
Thank you.
Bye.
Town planner, Charlie Rauchi.
Not yet. Clerk.
Clerk.
It's okay, man.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes,
Mr.
Kevin.
Mayor, this is Kevin. I still have 30 and a half months.
Senior moment.
A couple quick updates. Last month, you approved the sale of surplus goods. That was 2 Chevy Impalas. One sold for $4,700 and the other for $5,100.
I believe Ryan's gonna have a party to send those off.
Already at my house on
Oh,
Friday.
backlog. Glad we didn't give it to Harkers Islands.
Cindy Shershing approached myself, Brian, and John about restarting the age-friendly community program, and that's going to begin with a survey to send out to residents to find out what they think the challenges are for aging in this community. That survey is going to begin on May 1st, and we're going to advertise it through email, Facebook, and the Shoreline for the May article. Boardroom updates, you'll see we have a second monitor in place here now. And also the history committee has been doing some work in here. If you look over here, they added a panel to the timeline, and special thanks to Travis for raising it up 3 feet. That was a pretty tough task. So
Nice.
appreciate that work. We're making some plans to add some more history to the town in this room, and hopefully make room for more panels on the other walls at some point. Bulk item pickup, we scheduled that with waste removal for April 26th. Please remember to put your items out Monday night, the night before, as they'll be going through town early in the morning. And if you have a white good, be sure to send me your address and the item, because we have to report that for them to pick up with a different vehicle. One thing I forgot to add on the slide was March 18th, we had the tree giveaway for the Arbor Day Foundation. That was a great event. They were able to give away 210 trees, willow oaks and pin oaks, and bags of potting soil with each of those. We sent our final report to the Arbor Day Foundation, and it's going to be written up in the next Arbor Day issue. So as soon as I get that, I'll be sure to forward you all a copy. And then Acorn Court, construction began last Tuesday, and they've been working very quickly. The stormwater line has been completed through the property there, as well as the vault. And I have a couple pictures here. So it's kind of a rough picture on the right, but you see the bulkhead going out to the water there, and then the stormwater line there. Since then, since 5 p.m. today, that vault has been reduced 28 inches, thanks to Sunny and Dee for helping with that. So they're off until after Easter, and once they return, they're going to start putting down the pervious pavers in the middle of the street and relaying asphalt on the cul-de-sac.
Nice. Gosh, it's nice to see that finally done.
Questions for Charlie? And out the street, right? Not just the cul-de-sac, but on out the street, the asphalt? The whole street can be redone, right?
Yes. And they're also working on, we're doing a program to divert water spouts on the street from the driveway. So we're going to send out informational material, and they'll be able to come to us and get water diverters for their gutters.
Excellent. Good. Any questions for Charlie on any of those things?
Great job.
Yep.
Yeah.
Thank you, Charlie. Okay, that brings us to the second public comment period. Charlie, do we have any public comments?
Yes.
Okay. How many people are online right now? Just curious.
6.
6. Okay, thank you. Okay,
Set the timer for Larry.
Larry,
3
are you
minutes.
there?
What, only 3 minutes? Can you hear me? We're good?
Yes.
Okay, just a couple of thoughts here. On the budget, the issue of the beach tax, I would suggest you consider the possibility that if we remove it, or reduce it, I should say, we may find we're not getting as much money as we thought we were going to get from the state or from the county. So those are important considerations. The state and the county we control, the Beach Commission controls a bit, but the state is going to divvy their money up how they see fit. And going forward, we might not get something where some other towns might. There's towns that are bigger, more important, that take care of many more tourists that might be more attractive for them to give their funds to. We did real well this last time because we were the only ones that were ready for it. But now that the other towns all know about it, they're also in the same position that next time around, there'll be several towns vying for it. So I would suggest we leave it the way it is till we see what happens with that situation, and then can look at adjusting it if we so think so after that. So to help pick up the slack, I would suggest definitely using the $295K on the fire truck. to help this budget shortfall at this point in time. On the e-charger situation, I don't know what we would benefit having one or two in town someplace. They'd be public, they'd be available for anybody, not just town people. Anybody that has a house that bought an e-machine is going to put one in their garage for sure. So you're dealing with all the condos and rentals is what's going to happen. And, you know, a couple isn't even almost going to take care of them if electric cars really start coming about. I just think it's way too early for this kind of stuff, in my thought. We're years away, but eventually along the roads, the gas stations or some more likely restaurants will come up with these, because the fast chargers that Robert was talking about, I think you can get like half a tank worth of charge or more in 15 minutes, 20 minutes at most. But these level 2 take hours and hours, like you say. Another comment quickly, and this is the last one, on the stairs that are going to be replaced there in the building, town hall. I would suggest you strongly consider using composites as opposed to wood. It will really cut down on maintenance. They look great in the last 50 years. They're more expensive, but it might be better to spend the bucks up front. That's all. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Larry. Anybody have any response for Larry?
Thank you, Larry.
Okay, all right, thank you. Next item on the agenda are mayor and commissioner reports. Anybody have anything they'd like to report at this point? Robert.
I got just a couple of things quickly, I think. We pushed the mission statement to the SPC. There was just a question about some word modification. John Ferguson has pushed out a recommendation to the committee for their consideration, and probably the next meeting next month, we'll have a recommendation from the SPC. I think it's minor. I think it's a good suggestion that he's making, but we'll see how that goes through the committee itself. There is a question. I'm a little sorry that Chris left, but I've talked to a couple of folks about this, and I'd like for us to consider creating a position for Chris initially, or somebody like Chris if she decides not to do it after some period of time, assuming we want to create it. But basically, it would be an advisor position on resilience to the Strategic Planning Committee, to the Board of Commissioners, to the Planning Board, on things that she is really connected within her community that the majority of the rest of us are not. This is just kind of a thought at the moment. Hasn't really evolved in anything formal, but I think it would be worthwhile. One, I think she wants to. I've spoken with her about it, and she wants to help the town, but she's not, I think, ready because of her own personal schedule to commit to a committee assignment. But she can certainly do things for us and be an advisor on things that I think would be beneficial to the town. So I think that's something we ought to consider. I think it should reside in a particular location. My suggestion is the SPC.
Right.
We could probably do it someplace else, depending on how you all want to approach it.
I think it's a good idea. The strategic planning did it with David Balch very successfully, and it made a lot of sense and accomplished a lot. Look at the boardroom. So I think it's a great idea.
I think it's a good idea. It doesn't have to be formal in any way.
Well, it doesn't. I think she probably ought to have some kind of a title, because if she ends up going and interfacing with the planning board or the CAC, at least it gives it a little bit more legitimacy.
You got any ideas?
Well, I would say, resilience advisor or resilience. We haven't really gone far enough to get the, and I can get some ideas from the SPC as well.
Good idea.
But I think it's something we ought to think about.
We'll have a name the counselor contest.
Name
Next
the
meeting.
helper.
Next meeting.
We do that.
Yeah.
The other thing that has just come up to me from a number of folks is how we approach or solve potentially the issue of golf carts. And one thought that that we've kind of considered is it possible to turn Lot C into a golf cart parking area that would allow folks from Arborvitae all the way around the McGinnis Point down through Pine Knoll Boulevard, every extension off of it, to be able to use a golf cart to get to the beach. The question is, one, do we want to do that? And two, how we do that. There are a couple of options that may or may not be doable until we explore it. But I will say, unlike charging stations, there are a whole bunch of folks who do own golf carts, and many more that would like to, but don't buy one because there's no place to really use them, but specifically to get to the beach. So if we think that's worth pursuing, then it might be worth
Yeah, I think
going forward with it.
Brian and I explored that, gosh, was that a year ago? Trying to get them to that, by the oceans access right there. So that could be something we could look at again.
Well, I'm thinking that this would be, instead of trying to develop the dogwood portion of it, we may be able to piggyback on the access, the sidewalk that we already have going from Pine Knoll Boulevard to the PSB. I'm not sure how to do that, but it might be something worth taking a look at. So.
Will they be parking their golf carts at the PSB and leaving them there?
So there's right there.
I think you'd have to have a crosswalk at the PSB. You wouldn't want to do it and not have a crosswalk there, but there is a public beach access
right there.
Right
you remember
across
where the trash,
from Lot C, essentially.
where the trash cans used to be?
Yes.
Right there. You park the golf cart parking right there, and then they could you'd have to do something over the ditch.
I wonder if
there's a ditch there. Yeah, it's getting there from Pine Knoll Boulevard that's the issue. I mean, I guess we could use our water line
I think you
easement.
look at it and see where where it would best fit. But my sense is there is a
How long is
demand
that
there.
water line easement?
And I think it's worth at least exploring. We may not be able to do it, but it might be worth
committee.
Worth looking at.
Ryan, offhand, do you know about how many golf carts there are? And, from that Arborvitae, Pine or McGinnis Point, that whole area?
We tallied them last year. So there's last year, about this time when we were doing it for the speed limit discussion last year, there was 7, but there was a lot more that wanted them. When they would call us to say, what's the requirements?
Yeah.
One of the first questions we always ask is, well, where are you at, to make sure you're not landlocked somewhere like right off 58. And then when they say that they're on Arborvitae or Final Circle, we always make sure to immediately follow up with, you can get a golf cart, but what are your intended uses of it? Because if you're trying to get to the beach, you can't. And then, so that's dissuaded a lot of folks from purchasing that. But I get, especially during the summertime, 3 or 4 calls a month about, or somebody stopping in the PSB about that.
I guess my thought was if we keep it on the north side of 58, it somewhat mitigates the issue of crossing 58 with the golf cart and also having a golf cart on 58, which I know we can't do anyway. But it gives access for folks that are all the way up at the end of, Arborvitae Court, Ramsey, all that area, McGinnis. I don't even know if McGinnis allows golf carts, but I don't think we should spend a lot of money doing it. But if there's a way of getting there, it may be a worthwhile project.
It's worth looking at.
That's all
Anybody else?
Just a challenge. If we listened to Christine before, only way we're going to get people here is if we specifically, individually invite somebody and say, please come and bring a different one every month. And maybe it'll work, maybe it won't, but at least At least we're making an attempt.
Yeah.
Everybody talks about it and it never happens.
Clark?
Two things. One, I was glad to hear that you're going to do something with the crosswalk, the sidewalk from the Mara Suites up, say, to Juniper, basically.
I'm gonna get cost estimates.
Yeah, I think that's a good, to carry on with that. The other thing that's, what's the process of the crosswalks, and at least looking into at Yopon and Cedar? Cedar's used a lot. Yopon less so, but Cedar's used a lot.
Cedar's used a lot.
We just put with the state or somebody, we put a crosswalk in, maybe both of those. And I don't know what the distance is between, and what your feeling would be is
Are they too close?
well, no, Cedar and Yopon are not close anyway, but Yopon's probably close to Juniper. Is that too close to have another crosswalk?
Yeah, I would think if you're gonna add a second one in. I think
Cedar?
You try to spread it out as much as possible when you.
Okay, then Cedar.
People can cross there and go on Pinewood.
And come
over to
around,
the
right.
Beach access, yeah.
One other thing to just consider, if you're considering that, is if you want to keep the crosswalks consistent with the other three, it's not just putting a crosswalk in, but you've got the RFB signs, the push button signs, which as of 3 or 4 years ago were $12,000 a set. So I'm sure that cost is.
Well, no, I thought about that, but I thought that was up to other things, but at least we should keep them consistent with what they look like. I mean, you go from down Atlantic Beach and everything's different every place you go. So at least keep that consistent. I'm not quite sure whether you really need to have the lights set everyone.
I think they
It would
need
be
to be
nice,
all the
but that's a lot of.
same. Yeah, I
it's a lot
think
of
they need.
buttons. But at least have the sidewalks look the same. I mean, some have the solid stripes in between, some don't. I don't want to belabor it tonight, but at least have what they look like be consistent.
Okay,
Other than the lights.
anybody else?
No.
Okay, thank you all very much. Good meeting, we covered a lot of ground. At this point, I'd entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Thank you.
Let me give you this. I know you don't like paper,
Oh,
but it's recyclable.
did you get an A+? Okay.
No, this is, we started missing that with all the new, if you just pay attention to that
Okay,
part.
I'll read it.